sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
Home Depot haul. Okay, so the first thing I got is this Anvil flexible putty knife. Okay, these are like my favorites for like finishing any kind of drywall. And the 220 grit is just the best. Oh my god, it's so stupid. Guys, I'm literally obsessed with these 60-watt light bulbs because these are LED. It's kind of like shine bright like a diamond. Okay, I know everybody's gonna ask down in the comments like, where did you get your nails done? And I actually got them at Home Depot. There's some guy looking at me right now. Hey, how you doing? Last but not least, this is literally life-changing. This is the Dry Dex heavyweight spackling that you can use to fix holes in the wall. I know, but what's even crazier is that this goes on pink and then it turns to white when it's ready to sand. And that's why I got these. I just broke a nail. What store should I do next? Like giving super bright. Okay. Wolverine. This is what I got. Yeah. Okay, next up.
If dads did shopping hauls, that video is hilarious. Welcome everybody to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show and the once a month where we do the roundtable. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. Yes, that was hilarious to me because if you've ever watched any of those shopping haul videos, it's like the women always have like the long nails and they always tap on the products like that. So he made a video called If Dad Did Shopping Hauls. It was so funny. He even had the fake nails. So funny. Oh my gosh. Welcome back, guys. We have a great show tonight. Tonight's theme is Things Are Changing. Sort of like the Gary Clark Jr. song, Things Are Changing, but all of these stories have to deal with change. So we are getting into that theme tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat. I wanted to start off with something funny to get you guys laughing. I thought that was hilarious. Greetings, Kari says, yay, I finally catch a live. What's up? Greetings, James says, howdy and aloha all. Shout out to CBC Voter says, happy Thursday, Sabby Sabs, and Eric T. Red. Greetings, Tim, though, says, free Palestine, stop killing these MFN kids. My world view has completely changed. Like you say, Sabby, black faces in high places, like Obama being president and not freeing Palestine is disgusting. Yeah. Yeah, well, Obama being president and not advocating for black people either is also disgusting. But like you say, black faces, high places. Shout out to Dr. Darnell says, hello, Sabby, and happy Friday Eve. If the Democratic Party wants to win in future elections, they should all register as Green Party political leaders and not take 1 penny from the lobbies. I hear you there. Greetings, Lawrence says, free Palestine. Shout out to Sophia. Perhaps in this target-based duality, the wounded hunter has been lifted up above the crosshairs, healed of his injuries by the father. Then Mali on the litigious level to reposition the mystery. Interesting there, Sophia. Shout out to Hannah says, sup, Sabby. Greetings, Edward says, free California. Greetings, Mark, says Sabby. Shout out to Miss Andrea, says, hey, Sabby. Hey, Andrea. Greetings, Aunt Shawnee TV says, hello, everyone. It's so cool in New Jersey, Sister Sabrina. Yeah, it's finally pretty cold here now. We did have a little bit of snow, or if you want to call it that. It was kind of mixed with rain. You know how that is, right? But it didn't stick. I mean, it was melting as soon as it hit the ground. Shout out to C. Shata says, hey, Sabby. What's up, C. Shata? Greetings, Eric T. Red says, all right, we getting this party started. Shout out to Kyle says, I caught the beginning. What's up, chat and Sabby? Yes, you did. Greetings, Automaton says, yo. Shout out to Kimmy says, hey, Miss Sabby and chat. Greetings, Anthony sends a smile. Shout out to Randy says, I'm finally back home from rehab, Sabby family. I hope you are feeling better. Hope you're feeling better there. Greetings, Krista says, hello, Sabby and everyone in the chat. I hope everyone is having a great day. Shout out to Huey says, R.I.H. Brian Thompson. Oh, wait till we get into the Brian Thompson story. Dun, dun, dun. Greetings, Tabitha says, greetings all and peace. Shout out to Ravina says, welcome back, Randy. Good on you. Shout out to Casey sends solidarity and fire. Greetings, Josie says, doobie doobie doo, folks. Shout out to GG says, that video is really funny, isn't it? Yeah, that's a funny video. Greetings to my comrade JB says, hello, everyone. I hope you are all having a great day. I hope you keep shining and keep smiling. Forehead kisses to all. Keep shining, keep smiling, knowing you can always count on me. For sure, that's what friends are for. Some of you might be old enough to remember that song. Greetings, Miss Richie says, Dry Dex is amazing. Shout out to Tabitha sends a lot of emotions there, but ends with a laugh. Shout out to P. Smith says he's not waving his hands in front of the camera like, ah! Shout out to Shalom says Hezbollah is holy Jewish word. And shout out to Miss Richie says, I do shopping hauls like that. Oh, man. Greetings, Jake says Sabs in the house. Shout out to Benny says LOL. And greetings, Miss Kiwi says W2H Home Depot haul on the Sabby Sabs show. Yeah, I know. He made that pretty exciting, entertaining. I don't know if people get excited when they go to Home Depot or Lowe's. My dad always liked going to those stores, like the home improvement stores and all that kind of stuff. But I thought that was interesting. And what's up, Notori says, for good times and for good times and bad times, I'll be by your side forevermore. That's what friends are for. All right, guys, what is up? We have quite a bit to discuss. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who's a patron. Thank you guys so much. Patron peeps are in the house. Thank you to everyone who's a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories. We have Ultimate. There's Sabinators. Don't forget about those Sabsters. They're in the house as well. You know, just holding down the fort. Shout out to the Sabbies as well. And we also have a group called Members. Thank you, all of you. All of their names are listed here. And you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you. Thank you, guys, so much. Oh, boy. Let's get into it, shall we? Can we get into it? Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail. Ladies and gentlemen, what an interesting show again. The theme of tonight's show is things are changing. Just like the Gary song. I don't know if everybody listens to Gary Clark Jr., but I think he's an awesome musician. I saw him live. Okay, tonight we are discussing Crystal Ball smears Tim Pool. Yeah. Not good. Not good. And this has to deal with Russia. So we have to get into all of that because I think we have to get to a point, especially in independent media space, where we're not throwing around like the Russia, like, you know, we can't do the Russia propaganda stuff. We got to get past that. We're also going to discuss Tucker Carlson in Moscow again. And what does this mean for access with Tucker Carlson? We're going to have a pretty deep conversation about why it is that Tucker Carlson, who is now on his second trip in Moscow doing another interview, why is it that he is allowed to do this and not face the same repercussions as someone like Chairman Amal Yeshitela or other people like Scott Ritter, etc. We're going to talk about some things tonight, and this is something that cannot be ignored. We are also going to discuss, ladies and gentlemen, Eric Adams. Ooh, Eric Adams. New York mayor changes migrant stance. Eric Adams is announced that he has definitely changed his mind. Does this have to do with the charges that he is facing? Is this his way of kind of sticking it to the Biden administration? Or is this his way of just being tired of the BS? We're going to get into that conversation. We're also going to discuss, get this one, folks, Donald Trump may be tapping Ron DeSantis. It appears he is having a change of hearts with one of his cabinet picks. That is Pete Hegseth. Seems like he might be trying to swap in Ron DeSantis in Pete's spot. And I want to explain to you, why he's trying to or considering removing Pete. And I'm also going to tell you, we're talking about a defense position here, why this would also be problematic if Ron DeSantis is in that position. Oh, yes, we're going to take a trip down memory lane. Ladies and gentlemen, a trip down memory lane. And last but not least, we are also going to discuss, of course, you've heard the story, but we have new information today. The healthcare CEO that was killed in broad daylight, his name is Brian Thompson. He is the CEO for United Healthcare. What does that mean in the grand scheme of things? We're going to get into that and have people had enough. Have people had enough of this system? Things are changing. Don't tell the house slaves. Why only on YouTube? Why not stream on Rumble? I am streaming on Rumble. Don't know what to tell you there. Check that. It's working fine on my side, but yeah. Okie dokie. Let's get started with the first story, ladies and gentlemen. Really quick, if you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we're going to dive into the healthcare story. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was like a scene from an episode of Arrow. If you ever watched Arrow, the show, DC Comics, Oliver Queen, that was my show. Loved it. It's gone now, but that was my show. It was almost as if someone decided to become a vigilante of their own in real life. That's right. The CEO of United Healthcare was killed right outside of the hotel that he was apparently supposed to appear inside of for a United Healthcare conference. When I first heard this story, I was like, is this for real? And I had to look into it a little bit deeper and tell myself, like, okay, yes, this is for real. What is this really about? And what does this say about the system, the healthcare system that we have in place? Let's get started with this new clip here from NBC News.
Back. Police say Thompson was shot at least twice. The Minnesota man was pronounced dead at the hospital. The suspect taking off on an e-bike and remains at large. Thompson's wife telling NBC News her husband had recently received threats, but police say the motive for the attack is unknown. The brazen murder taking place only a few blocks from where thousands are gathered tonight for the Christmas tree lighting at Rockefeller Plaza. Police promising there will be high security. Stephanie Goss joins us now from the crime scene. Stephanie, what more do we know tonight?
Well, Lester, Brian Thompson was walking down this city block at roughly 6:30 this morning. He was expected to speak an hour and a half later at United Healthcare's conference here at the Hilton Hotel. He never made it. Tonight in New York City, a manhunt is underway and a shooter is on the loose.
Pause. So first and foremost, I know exactly where this hotel is located. I'm very familiar with Midtown in Manhattan, but I have a question about something about the 6:30 time. We're not going to play the video on here, obviously, but how did the shooter know what time that Brian Thompson was going to arrive at the hotel. So we know that the conference, she said it was starting around 8 a.m. But how did the shooter know that he was going to be there at 6:30? Why not 7? Why not 7:30? Why not 6:15? So that tells me that he must have been waiting for quite some time. Who knows? He could have gotten there around 6 o'clock in the morning. We don't know. But he was waiting for him. So you know that this was personal, fam. This is not just some, oh, I don't like this person, so I'm just going to, this was a personal attack here against Brian Thompson. Now, I want to show you something else from this video. We're not going to show the actual shooting, of course, but there was something else that I noticed. Let's come in here. There was a woman that was standing right next to, kind of on the other side of Brian Thompson. Now, the shooter did not point his weapon in her direction. She's fine. She ran away. So that's another way you know that this was a direct hit on Brian Thompson. Let's come in with a little bit more information here, and then I want to show you something else.
CEO Brian Thompson.
Every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
NBC News obtained this video from a law enforcement official briefed on the investigation.
We'll pause right here. So what you don't see, I'm trying to circle it here so you can see it a little bit. Over here towards the right, there's another person standing here. Again, this is a hotel. So there's a woman right here and she's standing. This woman obviously was spared. The shooter did not attack her, doesn't even point their weapon in her direction. Again, that's how you know it was a direct hit against Brian Thompson. Now, Brian Thompson is right here. So his back was turned to the shooter. The shooter also has on a backpack. But again, that's not, to me, that's not unusual or suspicious. It's not uncommon for people in the city to have a backpack. People in the city, like here in Boston, have backpacks as well. So that's not something that you would deem as suspicious. But what's crazy to me is when I watched this video and I was thinking to myself, like, I know exactly where this is. Like, I know exactly where this hotel is located because I'm familiar with the area. And this woman was standing outside and had like, it seemed like a coffee or something in her hand. And then she takes off and she runs. Now, they're saying that after all of this, he got on an e-bike and took off. So it's obvious that this was planned out. Like he knew exactly where he was going to be, what time he was going to be there. And he also knew how he can exit pretty effectively. They haven't found him. Still right now, they still have not found him. We'll come back in here with this a little bit more from NBC.
Leg.
At the scene, we recover 3 live 9mm rounds and 3 discharged 9mm shell casings. The motive for this murder currently is unknown.
Emergency responders couldn't save the 50-year-old father of 2, who was later pronounced dead at the hospital. The Minnesota native was in town for a United Healthcare conference being held at the Hilton Hotel. Police say at 6:44 a.m., Thompson was walking to the Hilton from a different hotel where he was staying. The shooter, wearing a black ski mask and hoodie, was already there, according to the NYPD.
So you heard that? The shooter was already there. So he was waiting for Brian. He was waiting for him. So we found out a little bit more information as well. They revealed a couple more images of the shooter. I do want to get into that clip here from News Nation. And then I want to talk about what was written on the ammunition that was used in that gun that shot Brian Thompson. Listen to this.
Joe, these images that we've seen that were just released in the last couple of hours by the NYPD show the suspect is a white man, but we really don't have much more than that to go on. His face is almost completely covered. These are images taken from, we think it might be a coffee shop, some sort of business establishment, just a short time before the shooting. He could have ditched all those clothes and that gray backpack by now.
Which is correct. She's right about that. And not only that, but this guy was smart enough to the point where he knew to at least have his face covered to whatever place he went to prior to being at that spot outside of the hotel. So even the other camera footage that we see right here, his face is covered. Now, I saw a couple of pictures on social media where it looked like it was showing his whole face. I don't even know if those pictures are 100% real, because people were saying, well, that's not the right picture or whatever. But this is what we found so far. I don't know how people can look at this and say, oh, I know who this person is, but they were smart enough, he knew, to make sure that his face was going to be covered prior to arriving at that location. She's right. Chances are he's probably already ditched the clothes. He's probably not even in New York. He took off on a e-bike, that was interesting. It was just like, and not to laugh, but it was kind of comical that he just like jumped on an e-bike and took off just like he was Oliver Queen, like the Green Arrow or someone like that. Mouse said that somebody tracked the bike. Yeah, but they still haven't, found him. And what I think is interesting is that they said there's a massive manhunt for this individual. And I want to prove a point. When people that are in a position of wealth, whenever they are attacked or whenever they are killed, the police are willing to have a manhunt to find the person who killed them. You also notice this with the case of JonBenet Ramsey, right? Like for years, they've still been searching for JonBenet Ramsey, or they were trying to find out what happened to her. But you have to remember that family also was very wealthy. There are people that are killed, people that are missing all the time that are either working class or they're poor. And there isn't a massive manhunt for their killers. Oftentimes the police don't care. I've said this before. If you're a runaway, oftentimes the police are not really trying to find you. But when it is someone that is in a position of, somewhat power, he was the CEO of United Healthcare. And then to go along with that, I mean, he's, just given who he is, they're like, oh, we got to find the person who killed him. That is not the same for other people that come from a different class. So keep that in mind.
I'm sure he did. That's, what the speculation is as to why he was carrying the backpack, that he planned this well in advance, as you stated, and he had his escape route going. And at one point he knew where he was going to change those clothes. And they will follow that path as far as they can and take it from there into Central Park, if that, in fact, is where he went to. So, everything is going to hinge on the cameras and putting a timeline and a frame by frame approach to where his directions went, and pick up more cameras from the stores, from everybody that's, associated with the programs with the NYPD. And they will start piecing this together. But this, make no mistake about it, this is well planned.
Yeah.
Very much well planned. And I do want to mention this as well. The book bag thing. They keep bringing up the book bag, and I cannot say this enough. In cities like New York and Boston and DC, it is not uncommon to see someone walking down the street carrying a book bag. And I want to say that because I don't want people to develop this type of, fear when they see someone walking down the street with a book bag now, like wherever they are. And I say that because we experienced that here in Boston after the Boston Marathon bombing. There was a heightened fear among the people, seeing people bringing book bags into buildings. And like, there are a number of rules that were implemented here in the city. Like, that's the reason why you can no longer take a book bag into a concert here at Boston. I was at a Celtics game not too long ago when my parents were here, and I couldn't even bring my purse in. You have to lock your purse up in a locker. That was never the case before. So I say that because I don't want people to freak out about, oh my God, there's someone with a book bag. Again, because we're in cities where there's public transportation and a lot of people do take public transportation, it's not uncommon to see someone in the city carrying a book bag because they may take other things in the book bag with them that they would normally have in their car. So I do just want to say that there. But we have to get into something else, because Brian Thompson, being the CEO of United Healthcare, it's not just the fact that he is the CEO of a company that has basically slowly killed people in the United States. They are terrible at processing and paying claims. And I know this from a firsthand experience. I'll get into that in just a second. But it's not just that. There was something else about Brian Thompson, and shout out to James Lee for this video. I want to get into this here as well, because something that James Lee points out is that Brian Thompson was also apparently under investigation. Listen to this here.
This might be the story that unites all of us Americans. It's got something for everybody. And before I go on, I just want to say that this was a real human being with a real family, and we shouldn't be celebrating anybody's offing. That being said, a lot of people are. These comments are quite joyful, one might say. Possibly warranted, because United Health is quite an awful company. Here they're denying coverage, also overbilling people, all kinds of shenanigans. But let's talk about the actual crime here. Was this a hit or just some disgruntled person whose coverage was denied? 80-90% of online commenters are saying this is a professional hit job. The New York Times also indicates premeditation. This guy apparently knew exactly where he was going to be and waited for him for a long time, which leads us to possible motivations. Shipwreck dissected this beautifully this morning. Basically, the CEO, Brian Thompson, was under investigation for potentially defrauding investors. He and other executives had insider information that they were under investigation by the DOJ because the company was getting involved in some sort of monopoly scheme. Here's when that investigation started. Insiders started dumping shares, including Thompson right here on February 16th, 2024 for a tune of $15 million, right before the news came public and the stock took a nosedive. And with the stock price jumping up after this news was announced, it's hard to argue that the shareholders were not happy, or not unhappy. We're happy. They were happy. And guess who happens to be the top recipient of United Health Group's lobbying dollars? It's none other than Kamala Harris. Another stick it to you from everybody else who wants to pile on to the most unpopular presidential candidate in U.S. history. So on one side, you got the working class laughing at this news because they hate CEOs and they hate how corporations run America. And on the other side, you got the ruling class, the shareholders, apparently pleased because he defrauded them of their investment. Well, one final note, I almost forgot. This is also great for independent journalism. Some guy on the internet who tracks city bikes, he apparently was able to trace which city bike dock the shooter left the bike at before the police knew even what was going on, and made that information public. Meanwhile, legacy media is regurgitating the exact same talking points over and over because they're too lazy to do any original reporting. Anyway, I think the theme here has to be anti-corruption, right? If you are a fiduciary, don't defraud your investors. And if you're an insurance company, don't deny coverage to your customers. And we can all just kind of live our lives in peace. I think America is ready for a redemption. Let's all be a part of this change.
So to that point, things are definitely starting to change. It could be that the person, the shooter, it could be that maybe he knew or had a family member or a friend that may have lost their life because United Healthcare did not cover them fully when they should have. We don't know, and we may never know. But the reality is this brings up a question about the system, right? When we talk about the system, I want you to see what was written on the ammunition. Look at this. Police release new photos as they search for the gunman who killed United Healthcare CEO. It says here's another picture, by the way. Another picture here where you can see a little bit more of his face, but he still has the hood on. Like he literally has on, I think, is this a green jacket or a gray jacket? If it's green, that kind of does remind you of Arrow. But he has the hood on his head, still trying to protect his image. This part right here, it says that the ammunition that was used was emblazoned with the words deny, defend, and depose. This is according to 2 law enforcement officials on Saturday. So let's think about that for a second. If you're United Healthcare, deny the claim, defend the lawsuit, depose the patients. So this obviously was apparently personal to the shooter. If I were to make an educated guess, probably personal. And what does that mean about the system? I want to remind you of a movie I saw many years ago. It was called John Q. If you saw this movie in the chat, let me know. If you've seen the movie John Q, raise your hand. Let me know if you saw the movie. If you have not seen this movie, you need to watch it. Because John Q is about, and Denzel Washington does a great job here. I think it's probably one of his best performances. Everybody points to Training Day, but I think he was phenomenal in this movie. Denzel Washington has a son in the movie. His son needs serious surgery that costs thousands of dollars. Insurance is not going to cover even the vast majority of it. So Denzel Washington decides to take matter into his own hands. I'm not going to get into the details if you haven't seen it, so I want you to see the movie. I remember the first time I saw this movie and I said to myself, once again, this is a message to everyone in this country, just how corrupt and unjust the healthcare system is in this country. No one should have to sit there and choose whether or not you're going to let your child die, or whether or not you're going to have to go out there and beg for thousands and thousands of dollars so that they can get the surgery that they need to save their life. But that's the United States. This is the country that we live in. We don't have health care for everyone in this country. And I can tell you a personal experience. My first job out of college, my first full-time job, was in healthcare. I worked in billing. And you know what my job was? I had to contact insurance companies that did not pay. This is why I'm very familiar with United Healthcare. Out of all the insurance companies that I dealt with over the years, United Healthcare and Cigna were the worst ones about payment. United Healthcare was the worst. Most of the time, when I had to pick up the phone to make a call and ask them to pay, it was United Healthcare who did not want to pay for patients' claims. Blue Cross Blue Shield was pretty good. TRICARE was phenomenal. Medicare was the best. When you have patients that need life-saving surgery or procedures, and the only health insurance company that is offered to them, again, because it's attached to your employer, just happens to be a company like United Healthcare that doesn't really want to pay anything, that means that you need money to cover what they are not going to pay. If we had a healthcare system in this country where everybody had healthcare, this would not be a problem. You wouldn't have to rely on your health insurance being attached to your employer. In fact, you don't have a say-so in that either. You don't have a say-so in what health insurance companies that your employer wants to attach itself to. There is a bit of rage that has happened among the American people. And people are saying, like, why are people online, like, not upset and hurt by this? To that, I would say, why are some of the same people who are asking me that question not upset and hurt by the genocide in Gaza? I noticed they seem to be some of the same people. Some of them. It is very difficult to feel empathy or sympathy for someone who's been the CEO of a company that has basically killed hundreds and thousands of people over the years because they would not pay these claims. United Healthcare was the worst. Was the worst. You watch the movie John Q, and I think you'll have even better understanding if you haven't experienced it yourself. And I told you TRICARE was one of the best and Medicare was the best. But the reality is, in order to get TRICARE, that is for service members and their families. You shouldn't have to join the military to get decent health insurance. I want to remind you that members of Congress have great health insurance that a lot of you will never have because you're not in Congress. How is that fair when they're supposed to represent the people? It's not. And then I want to land with this. The fact that Brian Thompson was killed, it makes you wonder, are things starting to change? Are people starting to find another way to fight back against the billionaires, against the wealthy health insurance industries? Is this the way of fighting back? And I would remind you this as well. Killing Brian Thompson doesn't change the system. Because you see, now that Brian Thompson is gone and he's no longer CEO, the system will just put someone else in that spot. So the system itself does not change. It's no different from swapping out politicians in Congress that are a part of the same party and hoping that you get something different. The system itself does not change. Now that Brian Thompson is dead, does that mean that people that are under United Healthcare health insurance are all of a sudden going to be covered? No. Does that mean that everyone in this country gets universal health care? No. I told you I just watched this show recently called The Madness, and I highly recommend that you watch it. One of the things that the billionaire character says in the show is that if you kill me, there's already 100 more of me that are lined up ready to replace me. This is why I advocate for changing the system. And the health insurance system needs to change in this country. It is going to take a fight. It's going to take a fight against the health insurance lobby. It's going to take a fight against not just United Healthcare, but Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, all of them. And in order for that fight to fully begin, this is why people have to ask themselves this question. The movement, in my opinion, has to happen outside of electoral politics, because a lot of the politicians belong to the health insurance lobby. So they're not going to be on your side. And even some of the ones that don't take that money are a part of parties that do. And they don't really want to be on your side because they don't want to use or lose their chance of having a successful political career. So the movement has to happen outside of the political parties. And it has to happen on the ground with the grassroots people. And the question that I ask everybody, is everybody ready for that movement? Because the death of Brian Thompson doesn't change the system. Let me know what you think. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, hey, hey. Fresh Face says, yo, word. I love the early Arrow seasons. Yeah, Arrow was based, man. I loved it. My name is Oliver Queen. I loved it. Love that show. Shout out to CM for being a member for 8 months. Everyone in the chat is beautiful. That's so sweet, CM. Thank you, John. Since you mentioned Michael Keaton as your favorite Batman, my favorite Batman is Kevin Conroy. R.I.P. and Mark Hamill is my favorite Joker. Batman Mask of Phantasm is my favorite Batman movie. Interesting. I haven't seen that one. Interesting. Thank you, John. Sabby, I don't see violent revolution ever being successful here because of nuclear. What do you think about non-violent revolution versus violent? Yeah, and I think this is something, thank you so much for that question, John. Like when I say revolution, when we talk about revolution in RBN, there's different ways that that can take form, right? So for some people, they feel that to push forward with a revolution, that it needs to be some type of armed resistance. And then some of us will say, you know, you can have a revolution that is not that way. Like you can have a revolution that is not like armed resistance, right? I think the first step is educating people. When it comes to the healthcare situation, though, I think a lot of Americans know the healthcare industry and the healthcare in this country is terrible. Regardless of what political side you're on, I think that's something a lot of Americans can agree on, right? So I think that's a great question. And I think people do need to be more clear about that, because sometimes you say revolution and people saying they want all of us to get out in the streets with guns and all that. No, I'm not telling people to do that. But what I'm saying is the type of revolution where you fight back against the system, there are other ways that you can do that type of fighting. Right. And I think we need to be strategic about that. And it's not something that I would discuss on YouTube laying that out, because there are people who watch this and they take notes. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, Chris C. Thompson was scheduled to attend UHC's annual investor meeting at 8 a.m., which explains morning. The hotel is on 6th Avenue. The conference still looking. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he was waiting for him for quite some time, because how do you know he's going to be there exactly at 6:30? You don't. So Janine says, yes, now we have clear bags for concerts. Yep. Skylar says, United ain't worth shit. I think you mean shit. Yeah. Nope. Thank you, Marcus. Major health insurance company rolls back controversial decision regarding anesthesia care. They're asking me for more of this at this point. It works. Yes. Blue Cross Blue Shield actually just rolled that back. They made an announcement saying that they weren't going to pay for, I guess, all of the anesthesia, which anesthesia is expensive, by the way, especially if you don't have insurance. But even with insurance, it can still be, pricey. But they did roll that back. I don't know if it was rolled back because of what happened to Brian Thompson, or if it was rolled back because the state politicians, particularly in Connecticut, pushed back against that. But I hear you. Thank you, CM. TRICARE for all. Thanks, Peter. Forgot when, but at a Kamala event, a person was having a seizure and the doctors on the stage say, "Is there a doctor in the house?" No oath, just money. Wow. Thank you, China. I smell a revolution coming. We are tired. I think so too. And the other thing I want to mention is, don't forget all the cop cities that they've created. They're all preparing for this. And another thing I want you to think about as well, what does that mean for the police state in the future? Because of what happened to Brian Thompson, this is where other politicians can argue for, okay, we got to ramp up and increase the police presence even more. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to live in a country where we can't walk down the street without seeing cops on every corner and stuff like that. We already do have a police state, but I don't want them to make it even crazier. Thank you, Dr. Grumbles. Hey, Sabby, I just listened to Tim Pool and his guests talk about the CEO story, and it was nauseating listening to their takes on it. I am sorry. Not a fan of Tim Pool. I know I'm talking about him tonight, but I'm not a fan of Tim Pool, but that's interesting. And thank you for this, China. Hey, Sabby, what's your favorite Christmas movie? That's easy. Home Alone. After all these years, it's still Home Alone. That has never changed for me. Thank you, Roger. FUHC equals EFF United Healthcare. Thank you, P. Smith. Fred Hampton's assassination was December 4th. Yes, it was. That's a good point to bring up, P. Smith. Let's get Rockfin, Eric. That's right. Thank you, Roger, for the tip on Rockfin. Police calling for an all points bulletin, not just for when rich are killed, but when it's also one of theirs, Sabby. James Lee gets something wrong when he said, don't defraud shareholders and don't deny health coverage to customers. No, James, it's either one or the other, not both. But the politicians have already showed their hand. They're not going to do it. We will have to do it via CBI amendments in 2026. Thank you, Dave, for the tip on Rockfin. Thanks to Sabby and Eric for continuing to use current events as a launch pad to overturn the system, seeing as it is an emergency now and the electoral thing. Thank you so much for that. All right, guys, if you're just joining, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you. And we're going to slide on to our next story. Slide on in there. Donald Trump, it appears, might be changing his mind about his choice of Peter Hegseth for the director of defense. Now, I'm not making this up, but this is what is happening at this point in time. And if you're new to the story, you don't understand why. I want to get into this clip here from CNN. There were a couple of issues with Pete. One of them is the fact that he doesn't have the experience. He's a host on Fox News, just not experienced in defense per se. But the other problem is he does have sexual assault allegations. And I want to get into that part first. Then we're going to dive into what could be happening here with Ron DeSantis. And I'm going to tell you why Ron DeSantis would be even scarier in a defense position. Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here.
Elena, you cover the Trump transition for us. So I'm just going to start here when it comes to Pete Hegseth. Once again, in light of this police report, we are hearing from the Trump team saying that he fully supports his nominee. There's no plan to even close to withdraw him. This report corroborates what Mr. Hegseth's attorneys have said all along. The incident was fully investigated and no charges were filed. Now, she says because police found the allegations to be false. I just want to underscore, we don't know that police found the allegations to be false.
This is where I hate, and I tell you guys, I hate to agree with Dana Bash here, but she's actually right on this one. We don't know that. So that statement that she's making there, it's interesting though that they want to bring up the sexual assault allegations about Pete Hegseth, but they pretended all this time as though Tara Reade still didn't have sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden. So again, it shows you how the media plays to their party.
What we know is that he wasn't prosecuted. What happened in between the allegations and none of them being prosecuted, we don't know. He said just now when he talked to reporters, as Manu said, that he was cleared. Again, we don't know that. What we do know is that there was an agreement, which his attorney says was because it was the middle of the Me Too eruption, and he knew that any public allegation would cost him his job. So he just wanted to keep it quiet. And it doesn't necessarily mean that he was guilty. We'll see. These are, again, the beginning of these questions. What are you hearing?
Right. Well,
politics?
the one thing we're hearing from everyone I've been talking to this morning about this, at least so far, I think what will change is how these meetings go today. I think that's the big question, is how do Republican senators respond to some of these conversations with Hegseth and also J.D. Vance, which I find fascinating. The only two meetings he's sitting in on are those with Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth, noting that he he's not sitting on the ones with Stefanik and Doug Collins that are also taking place. But all to say, one Trump source that I had this morning I was talking with said the same thing we heard from the Trump team on the record, which was the police report doesn't change anything because it doesn't change the fundamental point that charges were never brought. That is what they're going to keep saying. I think when I talk to them about the broader question about what is going to happen with this, is there a contingency plan? Are there actually concerns about this? A few things is we know there was a lot of frustration and uneasiness from the get-go with Donald Trump selecting Pete Hegseth. And that's partly because it happened so quickly. He called him down to Mar-a-Lago to interview him very soon after Donald Trump announced that he was going to be his pick to lead the Pentagon. However, they didn't have a lot of time to vet him, to go through all this. We know, and we've reported, that they were caught off guard by some of these. They've obviously seen the police report now, but
So it sounds like they didn't do a deep dive into Pete Hegseth. I don't know what's going on with people lately not having time to get things done, but it seems like they really didn't dive too deep in his background, which I think was a terrible mistake there. They probably just assumed, well, this guy is like, he's a commentator on Fox News, so he's probably all good to go. He's also a Zionist. Like, this is the guy that just kill all, he wants all the Muslims just to be killed. Like, it's crazy. Like, I'm just kidding or not kidding. Like, some of the things that he said about the Palestinians is very, very troubling. So he's a Zionist. So, the Israel lobby, it's a okay thumbs up for them. This could have been a Marianne Adelson pick. If we really want to get deep, it could have been her who wanted Pete Hegseth. We may never know. But the fact that they didn't look into this guy's background is very, very, very concerning. And when you look at some of these picks, it's like, honestly, out of all of them, like the Matt Gaetz pick actually would have been the best for civil liberties, because Matt Gaetz, one thing I will say, he's a Republican, but when it comes to civil liberties, he's actually voted in such a way that is good for civil liberties. Now, I agree with him on everything, because I don't. But when it comes to like free speech and censorship and all that kind of stuff, like, he tends to vote favorably for those of you that care about civil liberties. So, but we saw where that went, right? Like, they heavily did not want Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz ended up dropping out on his own. It's just like, forget it. I'm not going to go forward with all of this. But he probably was the one, I think, that probably could cause the most ruckus or bring the ruckus and say, no, we're not going to do whatever, the establishment wants us to do. But, he's gone. Hegseth is problematic.
That has been an issue already from the start with him. The other thing I think, and goes the same for Matt Gaetz as well, is there's still a fear of what else could come out. Because again, they haven't done enough of that background research on some of these people. And so that's where the fear lies. However, one thing to keep in mind with both Hegseth and also Matt Gaetz is Donald Trump hand-selected them himself. These weren't people who were pushed on him by others. Donald Trump was really the one who wanted them in these roles. And part of this is going to be an ego thing. That is why Donald Trump is standing by them 100% and really lobbying people personally to stick by them and support them through these processes.
And
I'm willing to bet Marian Adelson probably had a hand in some of these picks because that's how it is with the donors. You know, like I scratch my back, you scratch, I scratch your back, you scratch my back. They want to get something out of that deal. So we don't really know for sure that there was no other influence there. She's saying that, but come on, we don't really know. Come on.
he is somebody who was found liable himself in a court of law. He is somebody who has repeatedly denied the allegations about him with regard to allegations of sexual abuse. And therefore, with these particular allegations against these two men, he is kindred spirits. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest, that's a part of this.
And I mean, for Donald Trump, loyalty is a two-way street. If he feels like he's got loyalty from this Fox News anchor and the commonality that you were just talking about, then he's clearly sticking with him now. And yet, I bring up the question of loyalty because Donald Trump also throws his own people under the bus. Mm-hmm. So if this doesn't go well, if it turns out that it's going to use too much political capital, it's certainly a risk that he would jettison this pick.
I want to.
Okay, so let's go to this part here, which is what I want to bring up. He has a point about, he said Donald Trump will throw his own people under the bus there. It does say that Pete Hegseth is willing to continue to fight for this position. Like, this is wild. It's like a defiant Hegseth says he will continue to fight for defense secretary post. So it goes on to say here, Pete Hegseth, who is President-elect Donald Trump's pick for defense secretary, insisted during a defiant media interview Wednesday that allegations against him of sexual misconduct, mismanagement, and excessive drinking are lies and that he would continue to fight for confirmation. Hegseth, who was interviewed by Megyn Kelly, has been seeking in recent days to shore up support among Senate Republicans. Okay, so what was interesting to me here is some of the things that they brought up. Excessive drinking and lies. There were excessive lies from a number of politicians. So let's not pretend like he's the only one that has lied excessively. Joe Biden's been lying for like 4 years. You know what I mean? Like Donald Trump was lying before. In 2020, he was lying as well. My big concern would be the sexual assault allegations. You think that's what they would mainly focus on instead of lying and drinking, right? So especially considering the fact that they said he has not officially been cleared. Now, I bring this up because it appears that now things are changing, hence the chalkboard behind me over here. You will see now that Donald Trump may be changing his mind, and that is because of a lot of the backlash that he's receiving about this particular pick. And I'm going to show you who he's eyeing. This is crazy. It says that Trump mulls replacing Pete Hegseth with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Oh boy. And some of you may be wondering, why didn't he give Ron DeSantis a position to begin with? I'm assuming that's because Ron DeSantis probably wanted to focus on being governor of Florida and maybe was not wanting that. I don't know. But this isn't going to be much better, folks. I'm going to tell you about Ron DeSantis, especially when it comes to defense. It says that Donald Trump is considering Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as a possible replacement for Pete Hegseth, his pick to run the Pentagon, according to people familiar with the discussions, amid Republican senators' concerns over mounting allegations about the former Fox News host's personal life. Picking DeSantis, a 2024 GOP primary rival for the presidency, would amount to a stunning turn for Trump. But he would also find in the governor a well-known conservative with a service record. We're going to get into that record, who shares Trump's and Hegseth's view on culling what they see as woke policies in the military. So, My concern is less about woke policies in the military and more about who was Ron DeSantis when he was a JAG officer. Ron DeSantis doesn't speak much about his military past. I think I heard him mention it like maybe once or twice, but he doesn't really dive into what he did when he was a JAG officer. And there's good reason for that. I want to show you what you may be preparing yourself for here with him. It says that DeSantis, who served as a Navy lawyer in Iraq and Guantanamo Bay detention facility, was on an earlier list of potential defense secretary candidates that transition officials presented to the president. Trump ultimately went with Hegseth. So here's another one. As you can see, he was not Donald Trump's first choice. Notice what it says here as well. It says DeSantis's name was presented on a list, right? So it says he was on a list of potential defense secretary candidates that transition officials presented to the president. So who is actually picking the people for Trump's cabinet? And that's any cabinet. I would say the same thing for Biden too. Who actually chose those people? If they gave you a list, someone gave you a list of names, the transition people gave you a list of names. Did you really pick who you wanted, or did you pick who you wanted from the list that they gave you? Goes on to say here, but as Hegseth nomination has faltered, the list has been revived, and DeSantis is again among the choices that Trump is considering. Okay. Why is DeSantis going to be a problem? Yes, things are changing, but I think you need to know about Ron DeSantis's past as a JAG officer, in particular when he was at Guantanamo Bay. There's a reason why he doesn't talk about this much. And I want to give a big shout out to Empire Files. I saw this video when it was first released. You need to listen to this. Ron DeSantis, military secrets, torture, and war crimes. This is the gentleman here who is speaking. Listen to this.
So we went again on hunger strike. We were on force feeding. You know, it was torture. We were bleeding all the time. And I saw a fucking handsome person who was coming. He said, I'm here to ensure that you're treating humanely. And we said, okay, this is our demand. You know, we were not asking for much, you know. At the beginning, he was just...
It was Ron DeSantis.
Yes, exactly. The person.
He said, I'm here to ensure you're being treated humanely.
Yes, exactly. And if you have any problems, if you have any concerns, just talk to me. And, you know, we were drowning in that place. I'm like, oh, this is cool. That person actually writing something, he will raise the concerns, but it was piece of the game. What they were doing, they were looking what's hurt you more to use it against you. By the end of 2005, 2006, when he was there, one of the worst time at Guantanamo, literally. You know, the group who was in the administration, the interrogators, the guards, you know, the administration, all of them were the worst. And they cracked on us so hard when they came to break our hunger strike, when we went again on force feeding. A team came to us, a general, the head of the team, he was a general, and he said, we were on hunger strike, and he said, the first day, he said, I am here, I have a job. I was sent here to break your fucking hunger strike. I do not care why you're here. I don't care who you are. My job, sir, here to make you eat. Today we are talking, tomorrow there will be no talking. The second day, I swear by my God, Mike, they brought, you know, piles of Ensure, and they start force feeding us over and over again.
For those who don't know, Ensure is a thick, milky nutritional shake, mainly marketed on daytime television to elderly people. I've had them and they are very hard to drink.
Yes. I don't know if anybody ever had to drink an Ensure, but they're not like this easy, yummy thing to drink. But he is saying that Ron DeSantis, when he came into Guantanamo Bay, he was starting to force feed the people who were on a hunger strike with Ensure.
Yes. And Ron DeSantis was there and watching us. We were crying, screaming. We were tied to the feeding chair, and that guy, he was watching that, he was laughing basically when they used to feed us, because our stomach cannot hold this amount of ensure.
So did you hear what he said? Ron DeSantis was laughing while they were screaming. So this is who Trump could be replacing Pete Hegseth with for the defense secretary. And I don't think Ron DeSantis should be involved in any position that deals with defense. He was involved in torture at Guantanamo Bay. Let's continue.
I used to pour insulin, one can after another. So when he approached me, I said, this is the way we are treated. You should start to eat. I threw up in his face, literally on his face.
Ron DeSantis.
On his face, yeah.
Mansour vomiting on DeSantis's face in a desperate cry for help was well-deserved. The JAG lawyer would have been well aware at the time that this was indeed a violation of international law.
A violation of international law. So this is why. So why do you need to hear this? Because when it comes to Israel in particular, Ron DeSantis has no problem with what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. If you can stand there and laugh at someone being tortured, what does that say about you as a person? You think that's a person that's going to have any sympathy for what the Palestinian people are going through? Absolutely not. Ron DeSantis is also another rabid Zionist. So he's another one. So could you imagine Ron DeSantis being the defense secretary? This is why when Ron DeSantis was running for president, I told people Ron DeSantis would be even worse than Donald Trump. So we don't know if that's going to happen for certain. We will have to stay tuned to find out. But that is some scary stuff, ladies and gentlemen. That's Ron DeSantis for you. Let's get to some of the comments here in the chat. Holy smokes, folks. PB World said, you know it's bad when you agree with Dana. I know, right? Bad times. Alex says, not Ron DeSanctimonious. Oh my God. Thank you, Mark. Anarchy equals negation. Communism equals negation of negation. Just look a February Rev versus October Rev. Oh, February Revolution versus October Revolution. And thank you, Gamble. Revolution, if bloody, might begin with poor, jaded Eurasian Americans who've been down dirty by their own elite, despite generational indoctrination. And Luz says, yep, I call him Guantanamo Ron for a reason. There you go. Make sure you guys, that video, if you want to see the full segment, that's on Empire Files. That's Abby Martin. I think it's Abby Martin and her brother who handle this channel, Empire Files. You can see that full video there. Eric, you can put the link to that in the chat if they want to listen to the full discussion, which I suggest you guys do, because it starts off going through the history of like Ron DeSantis, like life and all that kind of stuff. And it leads up to the torture at Guantanamo Bay. Oh, it's her husband. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Teddy. Mike Prisoner is doing the interview. Thank you. Yeah. So it's her and her husband, I think, that handle that channel. Thank you so much. Yeah. Crazy stuff, man. Crazy, crazy stuff. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. Deshaun said, when Ron said stop teaching critical race theory, I knew what type of person he was. Also, just based on that, why not tell the truth and teach history and what actually happened? Here you go. Thank you. Okay, cool. Based. All right, guys, we're going to be moving on to the next story. This is interesting. Oh, Eric Adams, Eric Adams, Eric Adams. All right, if you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. Thank you. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. New York Mayor Eric Adams seems to be changing his mind about the migrant crisis in New York City. So I told you that things are changing. You can see that behind me on the chalkboard, and things are changing. The last time I talked about Eric Adams, it was after he was indicted with a list of crimes, also corruption. Now, some of you are going to hear this and you may think, well, maybe Eric Adams is changing his mind to maybe like stick it to the Biden administration. Could be. Some of you may think maybe Eric Adams is changing his mind because he wants Donald Trump to pardon him. Could be. And some of you also may feel like, well, Eric Adams has been indicted with all these different charges and he's like, just screw it and whatever. But he's still corrupt. Could also be. All three of those things could be true. Now, I want to be very clear. Just because I said before, I know that Eric Adams, spoke out against the Biden administration about them not helping him with the migrant situation in New York City and the lack of resources that he had. That still doesn't mean that Eric Adams, all the charges against him are bogus. That still doesn't mean that Eric Adams hasn't been corrupt. He has been corrupt. But now it appears in particular, the migrant situation, it looks like he is now willing to work with Donald Trump. I kid you not. I don't know if he's switching parties. I don't think he really said he's switching parties, but he was asked about this at an event here. I want to bring up this video so you can hear it from him yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Listen to this.
Those who are here committing crimes, robberies, shooting at police officers, raping innocent people, have been a harm to our country. I want to sit down and hear the plan on how we're going to address them. Those are the people I am talking about, and I would love to sit down with the Board of Czar and hear his thoughts on how we're going to address those who are harming our citizens.
So that is a call to Donald Trump from Eric Adams. He said, I would love to sit down with him. So I think what is happening is that because Eric Adams was not getting that help from the Biden administration, maybe he's like, well, since Trump wants to be harsher on the border, maybe I will get that help from him and his administration. That's what it sounds like to me. Let's continue.
Open to
hearing what their plan is to deport some of these folks, and you think the city, in some circumstances, should cooperate with ICE.
Let me. You know what's interesting? And I was talking to the team the other day. I want you to all go back and Google Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Google what they said about those who commit crimes in our city and what they said in our country. They said those who commit crimes need to get out right away. That was their position. So this is not a new position, because in the state of in the era of cancel culture, no one is afraid to be honest about the truth. Well, cancel me, because I'm going to protect the people of this city. And if you come into this country, in this city, and think you're going to harm innocent New Yorkers and innocent migrants and asylum seekers, this is not the mayor you want to be in the city under.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, a different tune that we are hearing from Eric Adams compared to a couple of months ago when he was questioned about the migrant situation in New York City. And it's interesting that he did bring up the position that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama both had, which I think people sometimes forget, but video still exists. They're still out there saying those things. A couple of things I want to bring up about this particular situation. We have heard from people in Chicago, New York City, and of course here in Boston, in my state here of Massachusetts as well, that have been dealing with this situation. And I think for a number of people, if you live in a state where you don't have sanctuary cities and you're not dealing with this issue, it can kind of come across as, oh, well, why are you not being so nice and kind to those people? Just let them stay there and it is what it is. Well, Eric Adams did that, though. Eric Adams said, okay, we got space for you. We're going to set you up with housing. We're going to give you debit cards. And there was a lot of pushback that he received from New Yorkers who were like, wait a minute, why are you giving them all this stuff? You won't even give us this stuff. We're seeing that their SNAP, they're getting more benefits than I'm getting for SNAP. Those types of things. So they started to heavily push back. Eventually, it got to the point where the numbers continued to increase, and Eric Adams reached out to the Biden administration for help. He is not alone. Governor Healy here in Massachusetts and Mayor Wu of Boston also contacted the Biden administration for help. They needed more resources. In Boston in particular, I brought guests on the show that were in Roxbury, where they were there and they watched a Roxbury recreation center was flipped to basically everybody else had to get out, and they were allowing the migrants to be housed there. And they brought in all types of gifts for them, whether it was baby strollers, etc. We had the conversation on the show and I showed you the videos. So these things are real. I don't want people to, I think sometimes like Democrats will hear this and they're like, it's being exaggerated. No, it's not exaggerated. These things are actually happening. And what is frustrating to me is that people like Eric Adams, who is a Democrat and supported Joe Biden, people like Maura Healey and Mayor Wu, who both supported the Biden administration, and they're both Democrats, when they reached out for help and they said they need more resources, there was no response from the Biden administration. And we know this because Mayor Wu and Governor Healy and Eric Adams have addressed their constituents about this multiple times. They were not getting any help from the Biden administration. So, and we can get into Chicago a whole other night. Kent from Hardlands Media has talked about what's happening in Chicago for, I think, many, many shows. So if you want to hear more about that, he's gone into a lot of detail about it with Jamal Green has come on to talk about that as well. Chicago, similar situation where a lot of times what they're doing in particular here is that they're putting them in low income Black neighborhoods that don't have a lot of resources to begin with anyway. And they tried in Massachusetts to put them at Martha's Vineyard, but the people at Martha's Vineyard told them they had to go. The rich white liberals on Martha's Vineyard said, you can't stay here. It was all over the local news. So it was again, oh, we want you here. We welcome you here, but not in my backyard, which is hilarious considering Martha's Vineyard is vacant for most of the year. People show you how they truly are when you're in their backyard. So Eric Adams had enough, and he made a statement publicly about it that the Biden administration is not giving him any help. Now it just seems, I don't know, maybe it's a coincidence, but it's interesting that right after that, that was when he was hit with those charges. Again, this is not to say that he is innocent of those charges, but what it is to say is that it seems like because he spoke out against the wrong people, they decided to bring those charges forward, whereas maybe before they were willing to look the other way. This is how it can be sometimes when you speak out against the people who are like, you got my back, I got your back. You go against me, I'm going to lay all your cards out on the table for everybody to see. So it seems like that's what could have happened. Some people feel it was because of his association with Diddy and giving Diddy the keys to the city and Diddy went down or whatever. I don't know. All three of those things could be true at the same time. But the reality is, one thing that did happen is that Eric Adams did reach out for help publicly and, according to him, privately. Now, the question that some people have is this something that Eric Adams is doing to try to get Donald Trump to pardon him? And you heard what he said there in that speech. He said that the left can cancel him. He said, go ahead and cancel me. Listen to this roundtable discussion here on CNN. I think you'll find this interesting.
Arthur represents one of Eric Adams's closest aides. You also count the mayor as a friend, so we'll disclose that. But I do want to, and I should say this aide is a witness in the investigations around him. But this is Eric Adams very clearly taking a page out of Donald Trump's book, maybe borrowing. He's kind of taking some of the shine from Donald Trump and trying to use it for his own purposes. Is the point to get a pardon at the end of the day?
Well, he's actually asked the question in that news conference, and he said, I've been saying this for years now. Here was as Eric's position. Initially, I think he felt bad for a lot of these migrants, especially my office is 1 block away from Ground Zero, the Roosevelt Hotel. There's a lot of women there with little kids, and he felt really bad for them. But as they kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, and he wasn't getting any help from the federal government, like zilch. Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and obviously the White House, he was getting minimal help. And finally he realized, okay, it's one thing to be nice. It's one thing now you're overwhelming my city. And then he started pushing back. I can't take him anymore. Now we got to get him out. Then you got migrants starting to beat up cops in Times Square. Then you got migrants committing like real crimes against the citizens of the city of New York. And he's saying, no, that's not going to happen.
Not to diminish those issues.
Pause there for a second. So did you hear what he just said? He said Eric Adams, again, reached out for help. And he said, and there was no help, there was no resources. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? At that point, he was able to put migrants in hotels for housing, but you can't take up all the hotel rooms because the hotel does have to make money and they do have to have guests. The guests have to be able to have rooms to stay in. Otherwise, the hotels aren't going to make any money. So we already know as well that cities like New York City, housing is far and few. I mean, unless you have like a lot of money. I mean, it's not that there aren't apartments. It's just that depending on what you can afford, there may not be much available for your pocketbook. So similar situation here in Boston. Like, it's not that there aren't apartments, but if you want more availability, that means that you have to be able to pay higher rent. And that's typically how it's been working for the past couple of years. So what was Eric Adams supposed to do? Well, I think anyone who wants to remain like in that type of circle, they would probably say, well, Eric Adams should have just kept that information to himself and not called out Biden publicly. And I disagree with that. I think you should call them out publicly. I think all these politicians should be called out publicly when they're not doing their job. You can't sit there and and there's buses and buses of people that are being sent to those cities in particular. And the city doesn't have the resources. This is after Eric Adams had already said he was going to cut funding from, I think it was education, the Department of Sanitation, which we all know, I think if you've ever been to New York City, the last department you should cut is the sanitation department. Like, seriously, no, people have to pick up the trash. It's millions of people in New York City. So he made budget cuts throughout the city, whether it was education, whether it was Department of Sanitation, etc. Meanwhile, he's like, what else was he supposed to do? And he wasn't getting any help from the federal government.
But
We've been saying that for a long time.
But I think the real question here is not so much about immigration, but about whether this turn has been toward Trump for a very specific purpose. He's being prosecuted by the Southern District of New York, and that prosecutor actually has already resigned. Trump is going to be in a position to potentially help him out in more ways than one.
It's an easy narrative to say, well, the prosecutors that came after the president of the United States are also coming after me in a similar witch hunt. Now, to be clear, President Trump was not prosecuted by the Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutors. He was prosecuted by the Manhattan DA's office.
He was investigated by the Southern District of New York.
Yes.
He was investigated, and then they passed on it because they thought it was a garbage case, and then the Manhattan DA's office picked up on it.
Granted. Continue.
President Trump was not prosecuted by the Manhattan DA's office.
Yes, he was. By
the U.S. Attorney's Office, pardon me.
Yes. Go ahead.
Mayor Adams is being investigated by the federal prosecutors. He will have a chance to have his day in court. The allegations are troubling, to say the least. But it's an easy narrative for him to be able to say that they targeted President Trump and they targeted me. Now, can we get in his head and say that he's trying to curry favor for a pardon? Who knows? But I do think it's an easy narrative to try to yoke.
Well, let me ask you guys a question. I mean, it's obvious that doesn't seem like Joe Biden is going to pardon Eric Adams. Do you think that it's possible that Donald Trump could pardon Eric Adams? Maybe Eric Adams is thinking that he has a better shot with Donald Trump than he does with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, I mean, only has a couple more weeks left anyway. But I don't think Joe Biden is going to try to pardon Eric Adams. I think he's probably happy Eric Adams was indicted because he spoke out against him multiple times and basically said that Biden was not doing his job. So what do you guys think? Some people are saying yes in the chat. Elwin says yes. AJ says, of course he is. They already tied, and Trump mentioned it was a BS case. So yeah, so that's another thing. Like maybe he is holding out hope there that Trump will pardon
himself to the president.
I wouldn't poo-poo this illegal immigration issue. I think people are very upset about it.
I'm not doing that.
There's-
Just to be clear, I'm not doing that. I was just saying that the issue for Eric Adams that is very important is his legal fate. That's
but
very.
But
that's
his
a big
most
deal.
serious governing issue is that there are roughly 760,000 illegal immigrants living in New York City, and almost 60,000 of them have criminal charges or are convicted criminals. If I were the mayor of New York City, whether I had my own personal political problems or not, I would be desperate to work with the President of the United States to clean up what's going on. Earlier this year, there was a police report that 3/4 of the people being arrested in Midtown were for violent crimes and attacks on the street were illegal immigrants. This is a local governance problem. My assumption is, I don't live here, I'm here a lot, that the people of New York City are hopping mad about it. And whether Eric Adams is using this to get political favor with Trump, I don't know. But my God, you're the mayor. Somebody needs to do something.
I think they're two different issues. But I mean, you're conflating a policy issue with the law enforcement one, right? And I think it's entirely a valid point to say that even in a blue city, immigration is a valid. I worked at ICE for 5 years. This is something
I know.
Oh, you know very well, and so I can tell you all about this. And sort of this question of partnership between blue cities and the federal government is a very complicated one. That does not change the fact that he's been charged with very serious crimes and suddenly seems to be yoking.
No, but it's not suddenly. That's the difference. It's not, he was elected as the law and order mayor. He was.
Oh God, this guy is getting rambunctious. He's like, no, it's not suddenly.
It was like 5 candidates. He was the law and order guy. So he's being consistent with being the law and order mayor. So he's not saying something.
I would
think he is being consistent.
Hold on, everyone. Let me let Lee get a last word in.
No, that's fine. I would just say, I think there's a reason. I think the question we're asking here is he yoking himself to Trump for a reason? And I think he is, and you can tell because he's using the anti-left language. He's talking about, come at me, cancel me, this kind of thing, which is what we say to people on the left. So he is definitely currying favor with the president by using this kind of language, because we can't pretend being indicted for a crime is somehow cancel culture, right? We can't pretend that if you have actually done witness tampering or bribery or destroying evidence or all these things that he's allegedly accused of, that is somehow a left attack on you. And he's using the language that Trump likes to use about wokeness and cancel culture and this kind of thing to curry favor, because Eric Adams is looking out for Eric Adams. And I understand that.
Well, Eric has always looked. I think Eric Adams has always looked out to himself. You guys got to remember, he was a former NYPD police officer. This woman right here, I do want to point this out for those who are not aware, Politics Girl, she's an actress. Like, I'm not joking, not making this up at all, not trying to, be funny or whatever. But if you look this up, and I looked this up before, she's an actress. Before she had the show Politics Girl, she was an actress. I believe she was in Toronto at one point. I don't know if she's still, doing the Canada thing or not, but she was an actress who then started that channel Politics Girl. So just remember that when you see her on these panels, like they literally have someone who's an actress sitting at the table with the people, because again, she's vote blue no matter who, and that's what she pushes, and that's what her brand is, right? But it's important that you guys know this so that you understand why she's there, where she came from, and why she has the talking points that she has.
But he needs a pardon, and he's kissing the ring.
He's the stop and frisk mayor, though. That's who he is.
Guys,
right?
hang on. We do have to go.
They do have to go. Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Eric Adams. But like I said, he is changing, his tune. I remember in the beginning, he was defending his support for like the migrants in New York City, and he was pushing back against New Yorkers about that. I've seen multiple press conferences where he has stated as such. And now it seems like he is changing his mind in this way. And yes, maybe it could be an attempt for him to get some type of pardon from Donald Trump. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Yes, Benny. Whoa, is that Politics Girl? Yes, that's who that is. Yeah. Yes, sir. She's an actress. Yes, she is. Thank you. Let's go to some of the comments in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's see where we left off here. Did I go down too far? I'm sorry. Gamble, yes, I did. Okay. Thank you. I know myself. Marquis DeSantis. Katie says, I hope New Yorkers vote him out. This mayor is terrible. He had no business being mayor. I was surprised people voted for him, to be honest. I was surprised Eric Adams won. There were a number of people that were running in that race, and I don't understand why people thought, whatever. Weedy says, why are the subtitles in French? I don't know. I noticed that when I first saw the video. I was like, interesting. Thank you, Jasmine. I wonder how many more Democrats will seek help from Trump. How hard will their liberal supporters clutch their pearls? That'll be interesting to see. Shayla says, our mayor told them to come to New York and the Republicans played in his face. Mind you, housing was already a problem. Gilbert says, Eric is a POS for his dealings. William says, nice blouse, Sabs. Oh, thank you. Thanks. Leroy, I wonder what indictments Mayor Wu might have. Probably none. I mean, she's in with the right people here. She was in with the right people. She's another Harvard grad, by the way. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, Troy. Didn't the speaker recently deny more Ukraine funding? These crooks trying to squeeze every drop before leaving office, SMH. Thank you, Jasmine. Cue criticism from pissy liberal voters, but they can't be mad at Adams. They said vote blue no matter who. Here you go. Thank you, Peter. Dumb question. Why was every black panelist on that CNN clip bald? Oh, no, you're right. Peter, no. Oh, my God. Coincidence? Maybe? I don't know. The things people notice. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, my gosh. I'll get Rockfin Eric. Oh my God. Interesting. Thank you, Roger. One, he was GOP when he was a member of the New York State Legislature. Two, one thing that slipped by you is the June mayor primary, Sabby. Three, if Eric kept his big mouth shut and not got into an argument with Florida and Texas governors, judging them, and they said, do you want them? Eric was like, sure. We'll show you how to be humane. So Sab, this still all falls on him. 4, Larry has explained New York City and New York State politics very well. The system is set up to where you can't get anything done in New York City or the state government without doing dirt. Very corrupt. Sounds very corrupt there, Roger. It is purposefully set up that way so that if you dare go up against us, we'll pull your card. Kind of reminds me of Providence, Rhode Island. Eric, we can go to part 2 for Type VNC. Kind of reminds me, I don't know if you guys know this, but Providence, Rhode Island, at one point, like their former mayor, he was indicted for racketeering. Like at one point, like I'm not kidding, like it almost sounds like something out of a movie, but listen, at one point, like Providence, Rhode Island was pretty much ran by the mob. And the mayor they got him for racketeering. It was very corrupt. But Rhode Island is a very tiny state. And a lot of times people are just like, whatever, a lot of people don't pay attention to it. That's why they were able to get away for that so long. Yes. Philip Blair said the Tony Soprano of Providence. Yes, it's true. Interesting place, folks. If you're ever in New England, stop by Providence, Rhode Island. A lot different today, but yeah, that wasn't that long ago, by the way. Okay. Quick announcements. First of all, thank you to all of you who have donated to Winter Wonderland. I am hosting one more mutual aid fundraiser for 2024. We are donating Christmas gifts to kids in Roxbury. By we, I mean the Boston RBN chapter. So we do mutual aid here. That'll be Sunday, December 15th at 12 p.m. This is invite only. So there are 50 kids in need from Orchard Park School in Roxbury that we already have signed up for this, but if you want to volunteer, that's something different. It will be at 2300 Washington Street in Roxbury at the Bruce C. Bowling Building. Thank you guys so much. We're doing really well. We've raised a little over $2,000 now. Actually, probably can change that goal. I don't think it needed to be 3,000. So I can probably change that. But we've done very well. And I just want to thank you guys so much. Again, that is the gift donation this December in Roxbury. Boston Mutual Aid Chapter is raising money to donate gifts to 50 children in need. And we're also going to have a catered lunch for their families as well. I want to go ahead and share that in the chat if anybody else wants to donate. But you guys have really helped us out. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. So I'll just put that in there. And I use Spot Fund. I know a lot of people use GoFundMe. I'll explain the story one day why I stopped using it. But long story short, I know the Gray Zone was using GoFundMe. And then one day, like, I guess because of what they report on, GoFundMe decided to take it down. So I didn't want to end up in that situation. That's why we use Spot Fund. And so thank you guys so much. I'm looking forward to that event. I'm so excited and I just can't hide it. I'm about to lose control and I think I like it. Another oldie but goodie. Whoop, whoop. One more announcement, folks. You guys, you did ask me to do it. I did do it. So I do want to show you that I did it. So you don't think I didn't do it. You were asking me, or I asked you guys, I said, should I put this on a t-shirt? So I did. So this is just a merch update for those who are not aware, because I don't even know if it notifies people when I add things to the merch site. But long story short here, I told you I was going to put that definition of socialism on a t-shirt because I wanted people to see what it really means. So I did add that. So this is a new one for Sabby Sabs merch. It's called Socialism, Workers' Own Means of Production. So I did put that there, guys. So I hope you're happy about that, because I know people were like, yes, put it on a shirt. And there's different styles, long sleeve, short sleeve. If you've been on my merch site, you know how this works. There's the hoodie. I think my favorite's the premium hoodie. I like that one the best. Yeah, the premium hoodie. Own the means of production. That's one that I added. And another one that I added as well, I told you I was going to do this one. I think I did, was the corporate media one. So this is another one where, I don't know, another way of us getting our message across to people. Like everything on my site isn't about me, right? Or doesn't have my name, right? So this one is corporate media lies. So I added this one and I do like it. Different colors are available. I think most of you already know this if you've been on the site before. There's long sleeve, of course, long sleeve, short sleeve. Did I do a hoodie for this? I did do a hoodie. Did I do a premium hoodie? Yeah. Corporate media lies. So those are the two that have been added to the merch. So if you haven't been on there, now you know. Socialism defined and corporate media lies. And then there's other ones, the same old other ones that were there before are still there, like Smile and Nod and the Anime Tee. Doobie Doo was there as well. I'm not sure if I even announced that one on this show, but Doobie Doobie Doo. Doobie Doobie Doo. Yeah, Doobie Doobie Doo is there. And then as well as Keep Up the Fight and the other ones that you guys have seen. So my store is linked to my channel, so you guys can check that out whenever you want to. But I did just wanted to let you know about that I did take you up on your advice and get that done. Yeah. Okay. Now we're moving on to the next story, and this is crazy wild, folks. So Tucker Carlson is back in Moscow again for another interview. Now, I think if you were following me back when he interviewed Vladimir Putin, you know how big of a deal that was at that point in time. An American journalist going to Russia to interview Vladimir Putin, which was a crazy big deal. Obviously, corporate media was against it. Of course, a lot of politicians were against it, and they said, you're talking to the enemy, right? I've continued to tell you on the show, Russia is not our enemy, right? We have to stop calling these countries like Russia and China our enemy and move away from that. There was a lot that people learned from that interview. But now he is back in Moscow again. And this brings up a question, and this is something that we all need to ask because we're going to do a comparison. We need to know, why is it that Tucker Carlson is able to travel to Russia, interview Vladimir Putin, and now he's interviewing, I'll show you in just a second. I'll pull up in just a second. Why he's able to do that, and why is it that other people, and some who I know, have been charged, or why they have been pulled off planes when they're trying to go to Russia. We're going to get into all of that. Let's get into this announcement here first from Tucker Carlson.
In the week since we left Russia, Moscow, where we are now, in February, after interviewing Vladimir Putin, we've watched from the United States as the Biden administration has driven the U.S. ever closer to a nuclear conflict with Russia, the country that possesses the world's largest nuclear arsenal. It has accelerated ever since, and it's reached its apogee so far in the weeks after Trump's election. He's now the president-elect. In that time, just a few weeks ago, the Biden administration, American military personnel, launched missiles into mainland Russia and killed at least a dozen Russian soldiers. So we are, unbeknownst to most Americans, in a hot war with Russia, an undeclared war, a war you did not vote for and that most Americans don't want, but that is ongoing. And because of that war, because of the fact that the U.S. military is killing Russians in Russia right now, we are closer to nuclear war than at any time in history, far closer than we were during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That would mean the elimination of Russia, the United States, and most of the rest of the world. We felt there must be someone behind the scenes in Washington working to make sure that this conflict doesn't become a nuclear holocaust. But we found out that no, in fact, there is nobody. Tony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, cut off all contact between the U.S. and Russian governments. There is no back channel, there is no conversation, there hasn't been for more than 2 years. That's shocking. Meanwhile, most Americans have no access to any perspective other than that granted to them by NBC News and the New York Times. They don't know how close we are. They don't know the Russian perspective. We've been trying for over a year to get that perspective out to
American news consumers.
We've also...
Pause. He's right when he says that a lot of Americans don't know that side. They don't know the other perspective. But there have been a number of independent investigative journalists that have been writing about that since the start of this war, since the start of the Ukraine war. Actually, the Gray Zone has been heavily involved in, writing about this. In particular, don't forget about Seymour Hersh's article that kind of went viral and drove some people crazy because he was telling a little too much information about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So there's been a number of independent investigative journalists that have been covering this for quite some time. However, they were not given either the access that Tucker was able to give, or they had been detained. I want to mention one in particular. So Fiorella Isabel, who works for RT, she's in Russia. She's part of Convo Couch. You guys remember Convo Couch, and she moved to Russia to work for RT. Fiorella Isabel was traveling from Russia, and I forget which country she was going to, but she was detained. If I remember correctly, I believe it was in the UK. Right? She was detained because she works for RT. She didn't interview Vladimir Putin. She didn't get that type of access, but simply because she works for RT. Kit Klarenberg has also been detained while traveling. Investigative journalist with the Gray Zone. We're thinking about a number of people that have been detained because either they went to a country that the U.S. really doesn't want you to go to, or you're covering a story they don't really want you to cover, but for whatever reason, and we'll get into that tonight, when it comes to Tucker Carlson, he is now back in Russia again and now sitting down for another interview with a Russian politician. He's not detained. Now, this is not to say that what Tucker's doing here is wrong. I think it's great to get that information out to people. More people do need to know about it. But at the same time, we always need to ask, why is it that he is able to have that mobility and to not be detained Yet you have other people over here being charged, about to be sentenced, and being detained. Let him continue.
Tried for over a year to get an interview with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. We've attacked that from a bunch of different angles. We've spoken to a lot of different people around him, had dinner with them. We've been in talks continuously, and those efforts have been thwarted by the U.S. government. The American embassy in Kiev, which our tax dollars pay for, told the Zelensky government, no, you may not do the interview. You can talk to CNN, you can't talk to us. So we've been unable to speak to him. So we came back to Moscow yesterday to interview the foreign minister of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, the longest serving foreign minister in the world. He's been a part of this government for 25 years. He's been in the diplomatic corps for over 40. And ask him, where exactly are we? Are we headed toward an unprecedented conflict between Russia and the United States? Is there any way to peel Russia back from the east, from the sphere of China, back into the west? Is that alliance permanent? And does the election of Donald Trump mean an end to this war, which is reshaping the world, the U.S. economy, the global economy, and risking the life of every person on this planet? Is that possible? We just walked out of that interview. It's absolutely fascinating. It's coming very soon. We hope you'll watch.
Okay, so that was the announcement about the interview that he's going to have with the foreign minister. And I do just want to go to that for just a second. I can't play a lot of it because, you guys know how this can be. But this part here, so this is who he sat down with. I want to bring this up here on the screen. So this is the second interview that he's having in Moscow, in Russia. And I want you to listen to just this little part here first.
Minister Lavrov, thank you for doing this. Do you believe the United States and Russia are at war with each other right now?
I wouldn't say so. And in any case, this is not what we want. We would like to have normal relations with all our neighbors, of course, but generally with all countries or not, especially with the great country like the United States. President Putin repeatedly expressed his respect for the American people, for the American history, for the American achievements in the world. And we don't see any reason why Russia and the United States cannot cooperate for the sake of the universe.
Okay, I wanted everybody to hear that because I am getting very tired of people, more so corporate media here in the US, saying that Russia wants to go to war with the United States. That is not what I've heard come from Vladimir Putin. That's not what you've heard come from the foreign minister here as well. What I have heard that has been said is that obviously they have been provoked multiple times, whether it's been by Ukraine or whether it's been by the United States, whether it's been by these coups that have been implemented, but also by the United States. They have been provoked and they have given warning multiple times that they do not want an escalation. They don't want to go to war with the United States. They don't want World War III. They really don't want those things. And at the same time, they can't just sit around and continue to be the West bully. This is why BRICS and more countries choosing to join BRICS is very important, because people are tired of being bullied by the West. And you can't really blame those countries for that. So he has this interview here. I suggest you do watch the full interview. It's on his Twitter page, but I had to let you hear that part because I thought that part was very important. Now, I want to show you something else because let me get this lined up here. Katie Halper just recently interviewed Chairman Amalia Yeshitela again. Now, Tucker Carlson interviewed Amalia Yeshitela. I've interviewed Amalia Yeshitela. He's been on a number of shows. Amalia Yeshitela right now, this month, is scheduled to be sentenced to prison for at least, I think it's 5 years, from what I understand. They're accusing him and the Huru Three of conspiring with Russia, right? Now, again, Amalia Yeshitela never sat down to interview Vladimir Putin, right? He's definitely not back over there again. From what I understand, when I interviewed them, they were in Russia one time for an event, for a conference, just like Scott Ritter has been there for an event, for a conference, not to meet one-on-one with Vladimir Putin. But listen to what is about to happen to him. And this is why I said you have to start asking questions. Listen to this.
One of, I think, the most offensive claims in the case against you is that you were kind of a pawn of the Russians. They suggest that your ideology isn't an ideology that you have. For instance, your opposition to the proxy war in Ukraine, it's not because you have a very strong record of criticizing NATO, criticizing interventionism, criticizing Western interventionism. It's because you're some Russian controlled dupe. So can you speak to that? I mean, how long have you had these ideas that you have that they are accusing you of doing at the behest of, sharing at the behest of Russia?
I think it's important that you mentioned Sami Al-Arian and his daughter, because we organized the largest anti-war mobilization after the 9/11 that happened in the Southeast. We had mobilization at MacDill Air Force Base, where much of this effort was headquartered. Our history has been one of opposition to these horrible wars. We were against Vietnam. We were against the attacks that were made on Cuba. I was in Nicaragua shortly after independence. That was there. So historically, we have been opposed to this, and they know it. And the fact is, they got all the documentation that shows it. And one of our lawyers asked the lead FBI agent, is being opposed to the war un-American? Said no. Was that, like some offense? No. Is working to expose genocide against Black people, which they said the Russians inspired as well? No. And so this is the kind of thing that happened. So that's why it was impossible for them to convict us for being under the direction and control of Russia, a foreign government. But what they did was they convicted us of being conspiring to do something that never happened, to conspiring to be under the direction and control of the Russian government, and which is extraordinary because that's a thought crime. It's mean that they didn't have to do anything. I had to have thought that based on their interpretation of whatever it was that I said, or etc. So that
part right there is important for people to hear. So again, that's what he said. It's not that I had to do anything, but it's the thought. The idea that you thought that there could have been. So Amalia Yeshitela is facing 5 years. He didn't interview Vladimir Putin, right? They came into the Huru house, guns blazing, pointing them at Chairman Amalia Yeshitela, his wife, and everybody else in the Huru house. They didn't do anything wrong. Nothing wrong. He didn't even, like I said, he didn't interview Vladimir Putin. So let's start putting things together, folks, because we got to start asking some questions. Like I said before, how is it that certain people can get a pass and others are facing 5 years? Amalia Yeshitela is like in his 80s. They want to send her to prison for what? For what? Because of a thought? The intent to commit conspiracy? What does that even mean? What are you talking about? How is it? How is it that Scott Ritter was pulled off a damn airplane, never even made it to Russia, and he was going there to go to a conference, which wasn't even about Vladimir Putin again, was going there to go to a conference, and he was pulled off the damn airplane. I know, I interviewed him on the show about it. Never made it there. Okay? Tara Reid went to Russia to promote her book, which she was actually having the book at that time. They were printing it in multiple languages. She went to Russia to promote her book, was told by Matt Gaetz not to come back to the US or she would be detained. But Tucker Carlson can go to Moscow, can go to Russia twice now and sit down and interview Vladimir Putin, and now sit down and interview the foreign minister. Now, this is not to say he didn't receive threats. There were people that made threats towards him. Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make is he wasn't detained. He's not facing any time. Now, Ben Norton pulled this out, and I think people need to pay attention to this. This is why he might be able to get a pass. It says, after college, Tucker Carlson admitted to applying to join the CIA. We know about that, but it's more than that. Tucker's father, Dick Carlson, ran U.S. state media propaganda outlet Voice of America, which coordinates closely with U.S. intelligence agencies. Now, I want to be very clear about this. You can't help who your parents are. You can't help what your parents have done for a living. But what this shows you, though, is that because of what his dad did, because of who his dad was, he's not facing the same type of heat that Tara Reid and Scott Ritter and Amalia Shatella and others have faced. Even with Fiorella Isabel, who also was detained. Kit Clarenberg, who also was detained. He's not going to face that same type of heat. So when you have an in, you see what I mean? They're less likely to come after him. They're less likely to charge him because he had that affiliation there. So his dad was tied to U.S. intelligence agencies. What I'm saying is that he's protected. I think it's great that he's getting the other side out, but I don't want people to be mistaken. I don't want you to sit here and think that you can just hop on a damn plane and just go to Russia and say, oh, I'm just going to go interview all these people and face no repercussions. Because some are protected and some are not. Here's another one. If we get to here, this is something else that he also mentioned that I think is also important. Now, Ben's really pretty good on foreign policy. Ben Norton said this: Tucker Carlson's role in the U.S. political system, aside from recruiting for the GOP, is to disrupt the anti-war movement and co-opt people who oppose the proxy war with Russia and Ukraine, instead pushing for war on China. So in his interview with Putin, he absurdly portrayed China as the new colonial power, ridiculously claiming it violates the sovereignty of other BRICS members. Listen to this. I want you to hear this part here where he brought that up in the interview with Vladimir Putin.
The question is what comes next, and maybe you trade one colonial power for another much less sentimental and forgiving colonial power. I mean, is the BRICS, for example, in danger of being completely dominated by the Chinese economy in a way that's not good for their sovereignty? Do you worry about that?
Well, we have heard those boogeyman stories before. It is a boogeyman story. We're neighbors with China. You cannot choose neighbors just as you cannot choose close relatives. We share a border of 1,000 kilometers with them. This is number one. Second, we have a centuries-long history of coexistence. We're used to it. Third, China's foreign policy philosophy is not aggressive. Its idea is to always look for compromise, and we can see that. The next point is as follows. We are always told the same boogeyman story, and here it goes again. Through an euphemistic form, but it is still the same boogeyman story. The cooperation with China keeps increasing. The pace at which China's cooperation with Europe is growing is higher and greater than that of the growth of Chinese-Russian cooperation. Ask Europeans, aren't they afraid? They might be, I don't know. But they are still trying to access China's market at all costs, especially now that they are facing economic problems.
So it's trading one boogeyman for another one. So while Tucker Carlson may be good when it comes to the war in Ukraine, he may be good on that issue. And he may be good with understanding, okay, Russia is not this big bad boogeyman and we need to, search for peace and pursue peace. But instead of pointing the finger at Russia, he still points the finger at China. So you're trading one boogeyman for the other one. This is similar for Tulsi Gabbard as well. People need to call this out. Tulsi Gabbard is really good at, fighting for and advocating for peace with Russia and Ukraine and not escalating things to World War III. And she also said, Russia was provoked, that type of thing. But when you mention the country China, her position changes. She also talks about China like it's a boogeyman. These people like Tulsi Gabbard and Tucker Carlson, the reason why they're still able to remain in these relative status quo circles as they are right now and still have somewhat of a slight anti-war, stance, and we kind of need peace, is because they still support a boogeyman theory. And that is with China. So they may not back that Russia is a boogeyman, but they do still support this idea of like, we should be afraid of China. So as long as you are still pointing the finger at someone else instead of the US hegemony, then that means that you will still be accepted into the status quo. That means that people like Tucker Carlson can still go into certain spaces that independent investigative journalists will not be allowed to, because they're pushing back against all of that rhetoric. They're pushing back against that boogeyman rhetoric, regardless of who the country is. So you have to pay attention to these types of things, guys. We cannot allow ourselves to fall for that. Again, we appreciate the work that is done when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. And Roger Meadows has told me this before. Roger Meadows had made it very clear to me. You got to take the good and leave the bad. So the good that you can take from Tucker Carlson, you can accept from him, is getting that other perspective when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, is getting the message out and letting people know, listen, Russia does not want World War III. They don't want war with the United States. That's the good. Take the good, leave the bad. The bad is that China is the boogeyman. No, we don't want that. We don't want that because there is no boogeyman. Okay, stop it. None of these other countries are boogeymen. You know who the problem is? It's us. We're the ones that police the world. We're the ones that steal resources from most of these countries. We're the ones that have taken over people's land. We're the ones that have removed leaders from countries, even had them taken out and installing the people that we want to lead that country because it fits our best interests. That's the real problem. Now, Tucker Carlson isn't going to go down that road. And that's the point I want you to hear. You will never hear Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard go down the lane that I just took you down. Once they start to do that, they won't be accepted into those establishment circles. So whether it's advocating for going to war with China or stopping China or advocating for Israel being able to take over the land, they make sure that they're still able to be a part of that status quo by holding on to some of that U.S. dominance, whether it's Israel or whether it's China. Tucker Carlson also, if you bring up Israel, his opinion changes. His position changes. I notice with a lot of these conversations that he has with people, they're willing to bring up Russia and Ukraine. But the moment that Israel's brought up, it's kind of just brushed off, or they don't bring it up at all. This is not to say that Tucker Carlson is like this evil person, but he is not perfect. And you cannot sit up there and continue to simp for someone just because they're right on one particular issue. So these are the types of things that we need to pay attention to. And we really need to let ourselves know as well that there comes a time where people are able to get by with certain things and others are not. And if you look by and you see the majority of these people who are trying to do the same type of thing that Tucker Carlson is doing, or they're just being detained left and right and they haven't even gotten there, like Scott Ritter being pulled off an airplane, but you see he is now in Moscow again for the second time. And you follow the line and you see that he does have those connections to those agencies. That explains it and that makes sense. So you can't be fooled. And this is not, I know some people might be like, but I like him on this issue. You can still like him on that issue. That's what I'm telling you. However, just because he's good on that issue, let's not sit up here and pretend like everybody else is going to be able to do what he's doing. They're not. I'm willing to bet you on this one. If any of those guys or ladies from the gray zone tried to do this interview, hold on, let me pull this up here. Like if Anya tried to do this interview or Wyatt Reed tried to do this interview, they would have been detained. He gets a pass. And that's what I want you to see. So yes, we're grateful that Tucker Carlson gave the Huru 3, a voice, but he wasn't the first. People on the left were interviewing Amalia Yeshitela before he was on Tucker Carlson's show and before he was, brought up on Fox News when Tucker was still with Fox News. So it's great that he gave them a voice And it's great that he's getting the information out. However, let's not let's not go down this road of, oh, this person is a savior and da 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 da, because you need to ask yourself how they're still able to maintain their position in the status quo while doing what they're doing. There's usually a connection there. Hey. All right. Let's go to some of the comments here. William says Tucker is a controlled op. AJ says they also tried to charge him too. Tried and charged are two different things. Trying to and doing it are two different things. When you have access to certain people, or because you have a certain family name or you have those certain connections, you're able to get past those charges. Zalipa says Tara Reid was stuck. Exactly. She was stuck. Leroy said crazy that Scott Ritter got detained as well. Scott Ritter never even made it there. They took him off the plane. Thank you, Peter. Tucker, rich, famous. Scott, no. Uhuru guy, no. That's why. And Kinman says, in any case, there is no hope of Trump stopping these wars. He begins in, I don't know where the rest of that one went. Sorry. And Lala says, oh, yeah, I peeped the game when he asked that question on China. Exactly. You just rotate one boogeyman for another one. That's how they continue to stay where they are. All right. Thank you. Okay. We have one more story for you guys, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, or share. All right. And yes, things are changing. It appears that once upon a time, Krystal Ball and Tim Pool sat down and had a conversation and pushed back about Russian propaganda. That was 5 years ago on The Hill Rising. You'll see that in a second. But things have changed because now it has gone from that to now Krystal Ball smearing Tim Pool using Russian propaganda. I kid you not. Let's go ahead and bring in this clip here. It was an interview that Krystal Ball did with Cenk Uygur, and it's this marker here where they get into the conversation about mainstream media, corporate media. And Cenk Uygur is explaining to Krystal how corporate media lies more than anyone else. And I think we all know that corporate media tells a mountain of lies. Listen to this.
Not that, it's that mainstream media, which is the main weapon of the establishment, is now greatly reduced in its influence. Before, we could not get past them in a Democratic primary. Bernie almost had it in 16, but certainly in 2020 when he won the first 3 states, and mainstream media defeated him with their lies and propaganda, right? Oh, he's going to execute people in Central Park, he's a Nazi, etc. So the mainstream media guys are the worst liars in the world. They lie way worse than even right-wing media.
I don't know about
that. Okay, we can have that discussion. I think you cannot find 2 bigger liars in America than Joe Scarborough and
that part's interesting. Hold on. He said then Joe Scarborough and I think he was trying to say Mika. Let me just refresh this. Sorry.
Lies and propaganda, right? Oh, he's going to execute people in Central Park. He's a Nazi, etc. So the mainstream media guys are the worst liars in the world. They lie way worse than even right-wing media.
I don't know about
that. Okay, we can have that discussion. I think.
So he said they lie way worse. They lie way worse than Russian media. Listen to this. A right-wing media.
You cannot find 2 bigger liars in America than Joe Scarborough and Whoopi Goldberg.
I mean, but here, I hear you, but I also have been kind of blackpilled on a lot of independent media because that tenant media situation where, Tim Pool and whoever else were taking random sketchy money to put out whatever propaganda they were told to put out. I just, I don't see what has grown up on the right in the.
Let's go back to what she said. This part is important. Not really good. Not really good.
In America than Joe Scarborough and Whoopi Goldberg.
I mean,
okay?
but here you, I mean, I hear you, but I also have been kind of blackpilled on a lot of independent media because that tenant media situation where, you know, Tim Pool and whoever else were taking random sketchy money to put out whatever propaganda they were told to put out.
Pause right there. So first of all, I'm not even a Tim Pool stan like that, so don't get it twisted. I could care less. Don't watch Tim Pool. But this is an ethics situation, and I push back on this because this is something that could really hurt Tim Pool legally or could hurt her legally, depending on that response that came from Tim Pool. Number one, Tim Pool has responded about the tenant media situation multiple times, whether it's been on social media, whether it's been on his show. And Tim Pool said and has made it very clear that when he decided to join with tenant media, he was not aware that they were allegedly, you know, taking any type of money from Russia, and they weren't told what to talk about or anything like that. Tim Pool has made that very clear. And for Krystal to sit there and to parrot that corporate media talking point, because that's exactly the way that corporate media explained it, that's a smear. You didn't even need to bring up Tim Pool in this conversation. Like, you didn't even need to mention the tenant media story, especially after Tim Pool has said, I did not know about that. Some of the other commentators that were involved with that have also said they did not know that they were allegedly getting money from Russia or whatever. So the fact that the creators said they didn't know, for you to continue to parrot the talking point, you're behaving just like corporate media. And that is a smear. Let's continue.
I just, you know, I don't see what has grown up on the right in the independent media space as actually being better than the mainstream press.
I totally disagree with you.
While
I'll tell you why.
while I feel like there, you know, what I agree with you on is there is a possibility that exists now that didn't before. And so I feel sort of, I guess what I relate to in your tweet is I would say I feel energized because there is a possibility that wasn't there, that is there now. I think the most likely outcome is that things continue to get worse. That's why I don't feel like optimistic, because what I see over the next 4 years is you're probably going to have, you know, a lot of cruelty towards immigrants. You're likely to have, you know, another inflationary spiral if he does, you know, half of the tariffs he's talking about. You could very easily have more chaos in the Middle East. We're already seeing it. More brutality in the Middle East. That's almost certainly going to happen. You know, you could have some like giant crypto bubble as possible, avian flu. Like, there's all kinds of things that I think could be horrible and brutal over the next 4 years. And I can't look at that. I would love to feel optimistic that, you know, something, there's going to be a light at the end of the rainbow. And like I said, I do feel energized, but optimistic is just not, you know, I would love to be there, but I'm not.
Let's just pause here for just a second, because I really want to get back to the media thing, because this is very disturbing. Because number one, you have to remember Krystal came from corporate media. She came from MSNBC. You know, Jink at one time also worked at MSNBC. But it's like you throw these things out there that you know is going to, how many people saw this video, for example, who probably may not have looked into that tenant media situation? So over 171,000 people saw this video. And I don't know if all of them knew about the tenant media situation at all or not. But if they didn't, and they don't do their research, if they don't have time to do that or whatever, it's easy to just take what Krystal said and just believe it and just run with it. And why would you do that? This is something that someone from corporate media would do. This is no different than what corporate media would do, trying to smear, you know, all these other commentators, etc. And this is not the way that she felt before. So I felt like, once again, why are you using like the whole Russia thing to throw Tim Pool under the bus, when just 5 years ago on Rising, you and Tim Pool both together were pushing back against Russian smears from corporate media? Let's continue. I'll show you that in a second. We have to do this up here. Hold on. It does this sometimes. Sorry, guys. Just give me a second.
Happen. You know, we could have some like giant crypto bubble as possible, avian flu. Like there's all kinds of things that I think could be horrible and brutal over the next 4 years. And I can't look at that. I would love to feel optimistic that, you know, there's going to be a light at the end of the rainbow. And like I said, I do feel energized, but optimistic is just not, you know, I would love to be there, but I'm not.
So let me agree and disagree in part.
Okay.
So first of all, I agree with your facts. So when we're talking about online media, are the Russians involved? Are there fracking billionaires that are financing shows?
Yeah.
Billionaire X and billionaire Y, and do some of those shows totally serve those interests?
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're reading the ads themselves.
Yeah.
So there's not even like, you know, the appearance.
So here is Krystal Ball and Cenk Uygur pushing the Russia is funding these commentators and these shows without any receipts. Like, show some receipts, because if you had proof that that was happening and you show the receipts, that's one thing. But to just say those things and you don't have any proof or any receipts, that's a smear. And I don't know if this is just some kind of way to take out those shows or what. I don't know. I don't know what the agenda is here. But neither one of them have shown any type of receipt that shows that those people are being funded by Russia. I expect this from corporate media. I expect this from Fox News. I expect it from MSNBC. I expect it from CNN. But if you're quote unquote independent media, which Breaking Points doesn't have sponsors, you're supposed to be a step above that. You're not supposed to do the same things that they're doing.
Of an arm's length distance
Yeah,
from
I
the
get all
advertisers
that.
and the money.
I get all that and I grant all that. Okay, so why then, given those facts, am I more optimistic about online media than mainstream media? Because mainstream media is a prison. And it's a prison you can't, in the past, you could not break out of. There's guardrails. You are not allowed to say things outside those guardrails. You cannot talk about how the donors obviously control all the politicians. Obviously. You cannot talk about how Israel obviously controls Washington and Washington's occupied territory. It's so obvious. But if you say you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. I hate that prison. I despise that prison of lies that is establishment media. Okay. So now in online media, yeah, you got the Russians, you got this, you got wild and woolly, crazy stuff. You got people I disagree with on the extreme left, on the extreme right. It's a mess in online media, and I love it. Okay. That's the jungle. But Krystal, that's our jungle. Okay. So we started this jungle at the Young Turks, and Breaking Points and Young Turks are in those same woods.
Right.
Oh, in the woods, we have to fight off the right, the left, the middle, the Russians, the Israelis, the Saudis, etc.
Yeah, and they pause here. Let me come out for just a second. Eric, can you close some of those tabs? And then that might help that video. The tabs before it. Thanks. So the point that I want to make here is that independent media is supposed to be the exact opposite of corporate media. Like, if you want to hear corporate media talking points, you can just watch corporate media. But to see people just being thrown under the bus why? Because they have a different narrative than you do, and being smeared as you took money from, you got to be really careful with the you took money thing. Because if you don't have any proof or any receipts that any of these people took money from the sources that you're claiming, then you could be looking at a lawsuit from some of these people. Okay, let's continue.
She knows we would have asked her some tough questions.
Of
right?
course.
There's a reason.
I was trying to get to the Kamala part. I don't know why this video is doing this.
Media than mainstream media, because mainstream media is a prison, and it's a prison you can't, in the past, you could not break out of. There's guardrails. You are not allowed to say things outside those guardrails. You cannot talk about how the donors obviously control all the politicians. Obviously. You cannot talk about how Israel obviously controls Washington and Washington's occupied territory. It's so obvious. But if you say you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. I hate that prison. I despise that prison of lies that is establishment media, okay? So now in online media, yeah, you got the Russians, you got this, you got wild and woolly, crazy stuff, you got people I disagree with on the extreme.
Just going forward a little bit so it can come out this way. I'm sorry, guys, that it's doing this. But there was a part
I've
here.
seen too much. I mean, you know what the incentives are. Like the incentives are to feed the algorithm, the incentives are to feed your audience whatever they want to hear. The incentives are to be, you know, ever more in your own bubble. And a lot of the incentives are the same, like access-driven ones and corruption-driven ones as the mainstream press. There's a reason why you and I didn't get interviews with Kamala Harris, because she knows we would have asked her some tough questions.
Of course.
Right?
But see, that means you're not trying to be any different from corporate media. Like, that's the thing. Like, I wasn't trying to get an interview with Kamala Harris. I wasn't trying to get an interview with Donald Trump. So that just goes to show you, I interviewed Jill Stein. I interviewed the third party candidates, but I wasn't trying to. You hear what she just said? So you're independent media, but you still want to have the same privileges as corporate media. You still don't want to be far removed from corporate media. So that's why oh boy.
There's a reason.
Krystal, who gives a damn about getting interviewed with Kamala Harris?
I'm just saying.
Oh, I am Kamala Harris.
But a lot of people,
I'm not interested in interviewing a corporate robot anyway.
But Cenk, my point is that a lot of people do care about that, which is why, I mean, so much of right-wing media is just like, you know, basically sucking off Trump and whatever he says and towing the line, because they want to maintain that access. They want to maintain, you know, their funding and their money, and they want to feed their audience whatever they want to be fed. And so, again, there's a possibility here, and I don't want to quash that. I think it's really important, and it excites me. In the same respect, like, I'm clear-eyed about what a cesspool a lot of independent media, frankly, is at this point. And so there's, I guess, a caution that I have about it as well.
Independent media cesspool that she doesn't really communicate with, to be honest. AJ has a point. Exactly, Sabby. She wants the access, but she wants to stay independent. Exactly. It's just like, you don't conversate with most of the people in independent media. Like most of the, and by most of the people, I don't mean all the people that have big channels. The majority of people that do independent commentary don't have large channels. The majority of people don't. So it's like, you consider there's a cesspool in independent media, but you don't even talk to half these people. When you see Krystal Ball do an interview, she usually goes onto the same shows. You don't engage with any of these people. So instead of smearing Tim Pool, what you could have done was just have a conversation with Tim Pool, just like you did here. So we're going to go back. I want to show you the difference. If we go back to 5 years ago, put this here. This was Krystal Ball and Tim Pool on Rising 5 years ago, pushing back on Russian propaganda. Listen to this.
I mean, of Hillary's attack against Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, not only was the attack made, but so many people in the media actually just gobbled it up. I did a report here about the New York Times quoting disinformation experts who backed up Hillary's report. I mean, this is in the paper of record, backing up a lot of these accusations. What did you make of that?
You know, I'll throw it to Ben Smith, the editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News, when he said, "Stop blaming Russian bots," linking to a story they published from 2018 showing the Russian bot narrative is dubious. There's very little evidence any of it's legitimate. But to have Hillary Clinton come out and make this, you know, conspiracy theory accusation is, I mean, I don't know what her intention was, but I'm happy she gave Tulsi all of this free press and attention and is helping her out with fundraising. So, you know, but you know what's really scary was when the New York Times the other day changed the lead, the first paragraph in their story to switch it from Russians grooming Tulsi Gabbard to Republicans grooming it. They later added a correction stating it was because one of Clinton's aides told them this is what it was really about. So I don't understand why the New York Times is now going to ignore the context of the conversation simply because Clinton told them they should change it, but they did.
Right.
And that to me is alarming because, you know, basically everybody reported the context of the conversation is that Russians are propping up Tulsi Gabbard and supporting her. If there's going to be a third party run, Jill Stein, who's also a Russian asset, would have to bow out. I don't know what else they could be referring to.
Let me pause here. So does everybody see what was happening in this clip from 5 years ago? What was happening in this clip is that this was when Hillary Clinton claimed that Russia Russian bots or whatever were basically after Tulsi Gabbard, that they had found a way to get to Tulsi Gabbard, and that's who she was, I guess like aligning with or whatever. Of course, there was no proof of that. And the New York Times just kind of ran with that information because they did what the Clintons told them to do. So that's not ethical journalism, of course not. Now, listen to this. Watch what Krystal does. So here's Tim Pool pushing back against the Russian propaganda, and Krystal does too. Watch.
No, that's so interesting.
I mean, and here's the thing too. Not only that, but after they did report that Hillary was saying, Russians are grooming Tulsi Gabbard, very clear who it was, they went to Nick Merrill, one of her spokespeople, for comment, and he said, if the Russian nesting doll fits, right? So it's not like at the time they were saying, oh no, she was taken out of context. It was only after the backlash that they thought, oh, maybe we better clean this up. This doesn't look good. Even Beto O'Rourke is coming out and slamming us.
Yeah.
But now she's doing the same thing. So the same thing that she was criticizing the New York Times doing with the Russian propaganda against like Tulsi Gabbard, and not like she was a fan of Tulsi Gabbard or anything, but she was calling it out like for principle reasons. Now she's doing the same thing with Tim Pool. So how far removed from corporate media? This is why I said before, and I still stand by this. I feel like Krystal and Sagar, when they were on The Hill Rising, I feel like Krystal was further to the left when she was on Rising than she is on Breaking Points. I feel like when and that's weird because when they decided to start Breaking Points and they went fully independent, they would have more leeway and be able to do more. And they didn't have these bosses like hanging over their shoulders, right? So you would think they would use that freedom in that way. But if you go back and watch the older Rising videos, Krystal actually was further to the left then than she is now with some of her takes. So she was pushing back on Russian propaganda with Tim Pool there, side by side with each other there, pushing back on that. And now she's doing the exact opposite. And it's ridiculous. And now she's a part of that Russian propaganda and smear towards Tim Pool. Tim Pool did call this out, and he said, hey, Crystal Ball, this is false and defamatory, and I would like a retraction and apology. So Tim Pool was asking for a retraction and a apology for what she said here. And that's the same part he shared it. So someone showed him this clip.
Yeah.
So the mainstream media guys are the worst liars in the world. They lie way worse than even right-wing media.
I don't know about that.
Okay, we can have that discussion. I think you cannot find two bigger liars in America than Joe Scarborough and Whoopi Goldberg.
I mean, but I hear you, but I also have been kind of blackpilled on a lot of independent media because that tenant media situation where, Tim Pool and whoever else were taking random sketchy money to put out whatever propaganda they were told to put out. I just, I don't see what has grown up on the right in the independent.
So we already heard the whole thing there. But as you could see, Tim Pool was telling her, you need to retract it and apologize. That's what he was saying there. So let me be clear about what I mean about independent media, because it seems like definitions are changing and I don't want to go down that route, right? Definitions are changing. I'll bring up Jamal Thomas's clip. To me, if you have sponsors, I don't consider you to be independent media, because how are you independent if a company is paying you to sell their products on your show? And the only way you get that money is if you advertise their products on your show. I don't consider that independent. I don't have sponsors on this channel. I don't have sponsorships. Nothing to hide, nothing to be afraid of, but I don't consider it. So when she mentioned Tim Pool along with independent media, I wouldn't consider Tim Pool to be independent media because he has sponsorships. I wouldn't consider David Pakman to be independent media because he has sponsorships. I don't consider TYT to be independent. They have sponsorships. And don't forget, they took that $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg. So what is this independent that Krystal was referring to? Because like Breaking Points doesn't have sponsors. You don't see them like promoting products or whatever on their show for other companies and things like that. So they do have subscriber base that pays through the subscription model. But what I will say again is I don't consider a lot of these people to be independent in the first damn place. So I think that's where we may differ. But the whole part about independent media, when Cenk Uygur was trying to explain to her, what you're not allowed to talk about when you're in independent media, and she was just kind of like, I don't know about that. Let me take you back to when she was on Joe Rogan and how she responded to that on the Joe Rogan show. Jamal Thomas, follow him if you're not. He is back doing his YouTube show. He's no longer with Fault Lines, because you guys know, again, due to censorship, they got rid of Fault Lines and all that stuff, which really sucks. I love that show. But Jamal Thomas, who's been around in this game way longer than me, he's been doing this a lot longer. He brought this up, and I want you guys to hear this.
Now, Krystal Ball was on Joe Rogan. And I want you to hear what she says in this clip.
I did a monologue when Hillary Clinton was building up to run for president. It was back in 2014. So this was early on. And I did this whole thing that was like, she's sold out to Wall Street. People are going to hate this lady. She's like the terrible candidate for the moment. Please don't run. And I was allowed to say it, right? I delivered my thing. I did it exactly how I wanted to do it. Afterwards, I get pulled into an office and, great monologue, everything's fine. But next time you do any commentary on Hillary Clinton, it has to get approved by the president of the network. Yeah. And think about, I would love to say that I did further Hillary Clinton commentary. There's no doubt about it. But I would love to say that didn't affect me and I was just there to be a truth teller. But listen, I'm a human being. I'm sure I responded to the incentives in that system of I don't want to get in trouble with the boss.
For sure.
And that's the way that it works. People, that's a very blatant example, but oftentimes people know where the boundaries are. They
So let me get this straight. You were on MSNBC, you did a monologue, you were slapped down for that monologue. And who do you think they slapped you down for? Do you think that the network just did it because they did it? Or do you think that the network is a propaganda arm of the Democratic Party every bit as much as Fox News is a propaganda arm of the Republican Party? You admitted yourself that you knew where the boundaries were, that you wish you could be a truth teller. But, you're a human being. And being a human being, you had to function within the context of the system to which you were operating, which was a Democratic Party propaganda piece.
Yep.
Shameless, self-admitted propagandists for the Democratic Party. Non-truth teller, as you pointed out yourself. And yet you're attacking Tim Pool. And you're disparaging all of those other people who, again, did not know where the money was coming from, and they were just doing their content. I'm pointing out that they had far more freedom in doing their content than you did at MSNBC as you gave propaganda to lemmings, cultists of the Democratic Party and the other blue no matter who've effectively weakened the party today.
That's right. Jamal is 100% spot on, because that's the thing. Some of us didn't come from, corporate media, and we didn't have that. And I will say, if you came from corporate media and you started your own, YouTube thing, you already had a leg up because you already had those, networks that you established during your time in corporate media. You already have access to a lot of people need be. That's why I point to people like Mehdi Hasan and Mark Lamont Hill and all of them that started in corporate media. That allowed them to have access to a lot of people. So they didn't have to start from scratch like the rest of us. A lot of it, I started from the bottom. I'm not Drake, but I'm going to be like Drake up in here, but I started from the bottom with this show. The very first interview I had on this show was with Torrin Walker, and it was about Black American progressives in this country and where do we go from here. I started from the bottom, and I didn't have anybody. There were a number of people that in the beginning, they were just especially, we're going to be candid here. A lot of the white commentators help out each other, and you can have a small following as a white commentator, and a large white commentator will instantly just kind of, I like this person. Let's pick this person up and let's boost them or whatever. But I started from the bottom. So when you had MSNBC and then you go to The Hill Rising, which also Rising is also corporate media. So you already had a following. So her and Saga already had that. And then they went over to Breaking Points and, built up their own thing there. Whereas someone said Tim Pool's coffee is his own. Let me go ahead and correct that if that's the case. I thought Tim was independent. He sells his own coffee. Okay, well, if that's his own coffee or whatever, then that would mean he's independent as well too. But the reality is that most of the political commentators in this space are independent. You just don't hear about them or know about them because most people won't bring them on. And that's sad, but it's true. They're smaller content creators. Most of the bigger channels won't even entertain them, especially the Black commentators. So what Krystal is complaining about, to me, is just kind of like, why are you whining? You have over 1 million subscribers. You're way ahead of most of us. Most of us in this space don't have 1 million subs. What are you crying about? That's what's weird to me. Well, we didn't get the interview with Kamala Harris. Who gives a fuck? Why you want to talk to her anyway? Like, it just, So that's the thing. So don't smear Tim Pool when he has pushed back against this multiple times and said he did not know that. It's like if you go work for a company and you don't know where the funding's coming from, you're working with the company, but you did not know. So that's what he said. She should have just taken him at his word. Otherwise, show some damn receipts and prove that Tim Pool was not telling the truth. If you don't have any receipts to show, you don't continue with that smear. That's fucked up. That's really fucked up. It is. I hate when people make up lies and say this person is getting money from this person and you don't show any receipts. Because at that point, like, that's a serious, I don't like that. I don't like it. So I think going forward, you need to ask yourself, all of you, what do you consider to be independent media? Because I don't consider channels that take sponsorships to be independent media. This is not hating on those channels. They did what they felt was best for them. And I did what I felt was best for me. Companies contact me all the time for sponsorships. I usually either ignore or I say, not interested. Please stop emailing. That type of thing. Because I know what happens when you take those sponsorships. All it takes is for me to say something on this show that they seem to have a problem with, especially the way that I've criticized Israel a lot. All it takes is for me to say something in a way that they have a problem with. And the next thing you know, they're like, that's it. We're pulling the sponsorships. So you start to get sponsorships and then you start to depend on them. So no, that's not for me. So I recommend to you guys, like, there are a number of independent commentators out there that are not taking sponsorship, and they're smaller channels. And I brought a number of them on this show. And I always tell you, follow them and check them out and stuff like that. Because my thing is, if you want to be like corporate media, then why the fuck aren't you on corporate media? If you want to have the same benefits and privileges that corporate media has, why don't you go back to MSNBC? Why don't you go back to, because you can't have it both ways. You really can't. In this space, you can't. There are a number of people that really do not want to engage with people unless they are corporate media. That's just the reality. I can't change that. But you do what you can do. But you try to have it both ways. And that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem, fam. Okay. I think she should issue that retraction, and I think she owes Tim Pool an apology. I don't get it. Yeah, it's just a mess. It's really weird to me. I'm looking at the comments. Sorry, guys. Thank you, Mad Matt. I love your show and your energy. Big fan. However, Ben Norton isn't at all credible. You prove him wrong, he blocks you. And he stole from the gray zone. Max said, isn't Tucker a Zionist? Tucker, I don't know if he's a Zionist. I know he seems like when people bring up like the Israel thing, he still kind of shifty on that, but he is still pro-Israel. That statement though from Ben Norton, it's not just Ben Norton. There's an article attached to that. So I did read the article, just FYI. But that's funny. I didn't realize that about Ben, that he blocks people. Thank you for this as well, Mad Matt. But I agree with you. There is a reason Tucker is the exception, and it makes you wonder. I'm telling you. Thank you for the super sticker, Misty Haynes. Thank you. Child of God says Krystal Ball got her start at MSNBC. These people know the trends before anyone else. They have the data. They sent her out as independent media plant. I don't know that for sure. I got to say that on the show. I don't have any receipts of that, but that would make sense. Thank you, David. Breaking Point / TYT equals corporate media adjacent. Thank you, New York Varsity. They always talk about how corporate media lies and misleads people, except when it comes to Russia and Joe Rogan. In those cases, it's all true. PFF. Mike says, this is what Tim Pool said to Kyle Kalinske on X prior to this. Down arrow. Oh, okay, that's the emoji. I'm such a boomer. I'm like a boomer in a millennial's body sometimes. Kyle, you're spiraling. Look at the state of the Democratic Party. You're a fringe element that just, I don't know where the rest of that is. I'm sorry. Thank you, Brendan. Crazy thought here. What if K&S are less freedom-loving independent journalists and more opportunistic Beltway bandits with their own donor base? What if, Brendan? We don't know. I don't know. Grown Girl says they do have sponsors on their audio version. iHeart Media throws all kinds of commercials on their show. That is why she is specific about people reading ads. She and Sagar don't read the ads, but the ads are definitely there. Kamala ran many ads during Breaking Points. Interesting. I did not know that, Grown Girl. I didn't know that. That is interesting. Okay. Thank you, JB. I'm proud to say that Sabby was my first guest. JB! And thanks, Killer Tomato. I'm not poor. I'm broke. Sorry for the overdue tip. Appreciate you. Oh, thank you, Killer Tomato. There was a movie when I was a kid, and it was called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. I don't know if you guys ever saw that, but it was pretty funny. I can see this sometimes. Race Pace said, to be honest, I like counterpoint segments more than the breaking sometimes. I can see that sometimes too. Yeah, I hate when people do that. I hate when people just say people were taking money from sketchy sources or taking, and you don't have a receipt of that. I hate when people do that. Let's go with Rockfin, and then we'll head on out of here, folks. Thanks. Thank you, Roger. Just like I said before, Sabrina, when they were at Rising, they were workers. So by default, they were to the left. Once you become a business owner, you start moving to the right. The only way you could keep your leftism is through you got it being a worker owner as part of a worker cooperative. YouTubers is like going to a buffet. Do you eat everything at the buffet? No, but you take what you like and leave the rest. That's a good point there, Roger. Roger's always good with this stuff. Always good with it. All right, guys. Tabitha said, agreed, Sabby. I love that movie. It's hilarious. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Put it on your watch list, fam. All right, guys. That is it for me, folks. I got to get out of here. I'll see you live tomorrow evening. And I'm also going to record an interview with Vanessa Beeley about the Syria attack. I've been wanting to get her on for quite some time, so I'm going to record that tomorrow morning, and then I should have that available for you probably Saturday. Tomorrow's Friday. So yeah, Saturday. But other than that, guys, I do have to get going. Have a good night. Yeah. Keep up the fight. Uh-oh, where did it go? Keep up the fight.